Saturday Night Live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Franklin Board of Education meeting for January 15th, 2025. The meeting has been properly posted. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Dr. Khan.
Here.
Mrs. Witkowski.
Here.
Mrs. Yank.
Here.
Mr. Sprague.
Here.
Dr. Beer.
Here.
Mrs. Sapersky. Here. We are all present.
Thank you. We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Nolan is here from Ben Franklin, and he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, Nolan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Ben Franklin Elementary presentation. Dr. Khan, please.
So good evening, everyone. For tonight's school presentation, we look forward to hearing from staff and stakeholders of Ben Franklin Elementary School. Joining us here tonight are a collection of students, parents, staff, and administrators at Ben Franklin to give the board an overview of some of the strategic actions they have taken to increase the engagement at the school. The team presenting tonight will give us a broad overview of their school goals and then provide some examples of their engagement team actions they are implementing to meet these goals. Welcome, Ben Franklin.
Thank you. Mr. Hine et al.
Dressed the same. That's amazing. I noticed that too. Like shoes and everything.
Mr. Hine, did you guys plan your outfits?
No,
You, Nolan?
no.
You too. Shoes
Just
and everything.
phenomenal taste.
We need a great picture.
Part of our school uniform. We like it. On Wednesdays, we wear blue. Good evening, everyone. Here with me tonight, I have Haley Bizniewski, who's a fifth grade teacher, Mara Magner, who teaches in 4K. Both of them are part of our school improvement team at Ben Franklin. And I also have to my right here, Jen Manvilla, who's a parent and our PTO president. And the well-dressed young man on the far end there is Nolan. He's a first grade student at Ben Franklin as well. We're excited to share with you a little bit about what we're doing better and differently at Ben Franklin this year, specifically focusing in on how we are working to increase engagement for our students, our staff, and our families.
So in addition to our school goals related to student achievement and closing gaps, Ben Franklin has 3 engagement goals for students, staff, and families. We're excited to talk to you about these tonight. Our measurement tools for our engagement goals are engagement surveys for each of those respective groups of stakeholders. The goals were selected based on data showing that we have opportunities and a need to grow in these areas. Each goal directly relates to one of the questions on our engagement surveys. So our student engagement goal is that students will report that they enjoy coming to school. More students will. Our staff engagement goal is that more staff will feel recognized and engage in celebrations of growth, both for themselves and for students. And then our family engagement goal is that more families will be engaged in conversations with their child and with staff about their child's strengths, talents, and goals.
So this slide shows some of the engagement action steps that we have taken as Ben Franklin staff and stakeholders have taken this year to achieve our goals. And we're going to share a little bit more about these strategies and activities we do with you.
Alrighty. So the next, forgive me for my voice here. The next slide, the Ben Way stands for Believe in Yourself, Encourage Others, and Never Stop Learning. We introduced this to our students and staff this year, and we continue to make daily and weekly connections back to, you can call it like our values or our operating system or kind of our belief sets. Our ideal state is that the Ben Way is more than just like our slogan. We hope it becomes, like I said, the operating or belief system of all of our students, our staff, our families, so that we can all be on the same team in helping Ben Franklin grow and get better. But also, these are values or principles or the way that we operate our own lives that are going to carry our students forward to be outstanding middle schoolers, high schoolers, citizens, graduates of FPS, and then community members as well. So beyond elementary school, we hope that the Ben Way carries our students forward. And I'm excited to introduce one of our students who definitely models the Ben Way every day, Nolan, who's going to share a little bit more.
My name is Nolan, and I am in first grade at Ben Franklin. I really enjoy going to music, art, and gym class. My teachers are kind and creative. Mr. Vine creates new fun games for us to play. Miss Axe is creative because she makes fun projects every class. Miss Payne helps us express ourselves through music. Mr. Hines' Ben Way morning meetings are the best. My favorite ones so far have been when he led us in singing a bunch of Christmas songs and when he encourages us to believe in ourselves. My classmates and I enjoy doing the Ben Way bingo every week. I think it is special that Mr. Hine thinks of us to do that. Miss Boris is a wonderful teacher because I have improved my reading and she teaches us new things every day. I especially enjoy social studies, where I got to learn about holidays around the world and our Franklin community. School with Mr. Hine as the principal makes my days so much fun. All the teachers at Ben Franklin are the best.
Awesome. Thank you, Nolan, for being here tonight and for speaking on behalf of your fellow students and representing Ben Franklin so well. A little bit about what Nolan mentioned. So the Ben Way Bingo is something that we use to help drive recognition for students and for staff in our building. So as students or staff are noticed or we see these values being lived in our building, then staff can nominate students. Every classroom will have like a Ben Way Bingo board. And so when a teacher catches a student, hey, you demonstrated believing in yourself by, persisting on this problem, they can put their name up on the board, and then every Monday we draw like one of the bingo winners, and we do little prizes and stuff like that. So it's been fun to engage the students in that way. And then the Ben Way Bingo for staff was actually a student idea. So they came forward and said, hey, we have these for students, but we would love, as students, some of our fifth graders had the idea of like, let's develop a staff edition where parents and students can nominate staff members. And that's one of the pictures you see there. That's a large vinyl banner in the main hallway where students have nominated staff members. And it's amazing to see early on in the school year how we are noticing these things in each other. And when we notice those things in others and we recognize the value of those things, then as humans, we start to provide more of those things that are getting recognized. So we're excited about that. On the next slide, one of the more unique changes to our school schedule this year is the inclusion of an all-school Thursday morning meeting. So our students and staff gather in the gym every Thursday for a short message relating to the Ben Way. Typically, the Ben Way meetings last about 20 minutes, so it's our groups, our students are phenomenal at getting into the gym, following routine procedure, finding their assigned spot. We speak for 15 to 20 minutes. We've been bringing in speakers. We've had students put together presentations, and all of it is kind of relating to the Ben Way in some capacity. So far this year, we've hosted several engaging speakers ranging from Sadie, the therapy dog, to Harley, which is the canine law enforcement dog that works with Officer Miller of the Franklin Police Department. Some of our more memorable Thursdays included a great conversation led by our transition services students, where they shared a message about inclusion, believing in yourself, encouraging others, and that was by far one of my most favorite as someone that worked closely with those students at the high school. And now to see them like in front of 315 of, future FPS graduates, and being able to share such a clear, concise, message that relates very closely to our Ben way. Just prior to winter break, we celebrated the end of 2024 with some buddy class holiday carols as well. So it's an opportunity for fun, bringing people together. It's the highlight of my week personally, because it's the opportunity where we get to all be together in the same room, hearing the same message. And I love being able to recognize and highlight and bring forward student speakers, staff speakers, and others that are connected to Ben Franklin. So that's our Ben Way morning meetings. And then we'll talk a little bit about some other engagement strategies.
So the family engagement team continues to work on building connections between families and our school. So we've taken a few new action steps this year based off of the Ben Way and just trying to bring us all together. One thing that we have started is a birthday table once a month. If it's your birthday or possibly your half birthday, depending on where it falls. Families, it could be parents, grandparents, whoever could make it there for their child are invited to come to a lunch period and just spend some time with them in the lunchroom. It's been very well attended. I go in there and take pictures, and people are thanking us for getting them into the school and just letting them spend time in their student's day, and they leave before recess. And it's just been a very engaging opportunity for parents to see what the school day looks like, and for kids seeing that their parents are in their school and showing them what they do on a daily basis. Something else that we have started is in the entryway of Ben Franklin, there are 2 display cabinets that many times are used for artwork, but when they aren't, they had been empty. And we came up with a way for students can bring in collections that they have from their own homes and display them. There's a picture of the student, like you can see, they give a little description, and then they can display their collections. I have the opportunity to see students come in every day because I pick up my 4K students right in the entryway, and anytime there's a new collection, everybody notices, everyone stops. You kind of have to start getting them to keep on going. My students sit at the benches, and every day they pick their favorite thing there, and they want to talk about that same feather that they've seen for the 2 weeks, and it's just been a nice way for students to showcase things that they are interested in outside of school and give more connection. So those are 2 things we've done. Other things that we have done to connect families with our school is we made it a goal to touch base with every individual students' parents in the first month of school, either email, phone call, some type of connection prior to, you see them at open house, that's kind of a crazy time to meet a lot of people, and then you don't see them again formally until conferences. So we wanted to make it another connection with all the parents. Prior to conferences, we all made an effort to find some way to get feedback on what parents would like to talk about at conferences, so it's not just talking at them, that it became a conversation about anything that they wanted to talk about and then things we wanted to share as well. So people did Google Forms or paper forms, just a way to get feedback prior to meeting together. And then recently, before the January period of all this testing and assessing, we had families reach out with positive notes of encouragement that we are posting on privacy folders during testing, just to encourage their own children they can do it, try their best, and teachers are saying it, and now they have their families saying it as well.
Some other unique ways that we're engaging with parents this year. So we have, we call it the Parent Learning Connection, or the PLC for parents. So essentially, from my own perspective, I'm a parent of students at FPS, and I work in a school every single day. And there's still things that I'm continuously learning as a parent. Sometimes it's easier to run a school building than it is to try to create great routines and procedures for my own children. And so in that learning and working with some of our staff at Ben Franklin, we started to try to populate ideas on what do we really wish parents knew more about, and how do we make it accessible and parent friendly. So it's not, we're not sending them stacks of books about how to engage their child with really specific reading strategies, the same ones that we use here at school, but how do we make that parent friendly so that when they're at home, they find it as accessible, they find that it's like easy kind of like go-tos of things that they can be repeating at home that will then reinforce growth and achievement here at school. And so you can see on the screen there, these are some of the topics. The newsletter is sent out every Thursday. It's sent to all of our Ben Franklin parents. It's basically one topic a week, and we try to make it as timely as possible. So we included messaging about our assessments. We include messaging around reading strategies, and then basically anything that's going to relate to our school goals. And then the goal again is to engage parents in some sort of learning. Like we're all, that never stop learning aspect applies to our entire school community, and Ben Franklin will grow and achieve higher and faster when we have parents who feel very confident and well equipped to support the things that we're doing at school, at home, and that's going to in turn create more confident children as well. So the other add-on to that too is we've started hosting a weekly like open parent meeting. So we send out the PLC with the topic of the week, and then the next day we host I host a 30-minute or more just open Google Meet, so parents can log in, ask questions about our school goals or the topic of that week, and that's been amazing to hear more from our parents around like what questions do they have and how can we as a school system help answer those. We're always looking for more participants. It's been great, like small group conversations so far. I always leave those meetings thinking differently, just as a parent, because we're engaging in conversation back and forth, and it's definitely not a one-way street. And it's exciting. You know, the hope is that we can continue to grow that. And again, like I said, we're going to accomplish our goals a lot faster at Ben Franklin if we can continue to drive stronger parent engagement and help our parents learn alongside us to then support their children at school. I'm excited to have with us tonight a highly engaged parent. She's the president of our PTO, Jen Manvilla, who can share a little bit more about how we're partnering together to grow Ben Franklin.
As PTO president, it has been an honor and a privilege working alongside Mr. Hine this year. He's been extremely supportive of our efforts to engage families in school events, as well as work towards our PTO goal of building community at Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin PTO hosted 3 large events this fall with great success. Back in September, we had a playground full of families playing, enjoying popsicles, dancing, and chatting until dusk to kick off the school year. You'll see a couple of those pictures right up there. It was a beautiful thing seeing so many families come together in one place. In October, our families came together to blow our fundraising goal out of the water, proudly raising almost $20,000 for students to take out of the school learning experiences, as well as for teachers to use as they see fit in their classrooms. In November, we hosted our first annual Fall Fun Fair, where we fundraised over $1,500 to help facilitate creating games and activities to be painted on our playground blacktop for a more engaging and fun recess experience for all. Many Franklin businesses donated gift cards and products to our raffle. Kids gathered around a giant TV to watch the FHS football game. Games were played, candy prizes were won, and an entire gym full of Ben Franklin families came together to support our school. Community was definitely built that night. We look forward to our upcoming events, including a movie night, a crafternoon, a talent show, and bingo night. None of these events would be successful without the support of an involved staff and principal. As a parent, I am continually impressed by the communication and support that has been provided this year. My son's teacher, Mrs. Boris, sends detailed updates and pictures every week, including ways to support the PTO. We are truly working together as a team. This is extremely important as a parent in order to also support our students at home. Nolan has gotten to participate in the birthday table, display his train collection, which have made him feel connected to and proud to be a student at Ben Franklin. Mr. Hine has introduced his new PLC letters, showing his dedication to engaging families into supporting their child's learning and well-being. He also offers open office hours to welcome conversations about the topics in his PLCs, which is something I have never heard of in my 14 years in education. Additionally, Mr. Hine has created the new Ben tagline the school has embraced as its foundation, posting on Facebook about the students who are exhibiting the Ben way in order to celebrate their successes. Lastly, and as a teacher myself, this speaks volumes to Mr. Hine's care for his staff and school. As parents, we are welcomed each week to shout out a teacher at Ben Franklin who created a positive experience for our child. He then prints these out and shares them with staff who received the shout out. When an employee feels valued and recognized for doing something amazing, they're going to undoubtedly continue to do that amazing thing. This is how a positive and successful school community is established and built, and I'm proud to say that our family gets to be here for it.
So inside the walls of Ben Franklin with the kids themselves each day, we are working to build a community. And we have two ways that we really do that to build community, not just in their own classroom, but across the building. Our building is set up as a unique letter T. So sometimes, like Mara and I will say, we're on the opposite end, literally the opposite ends of the world, and we don't see each other as often. So one way we do that is through buddy classes, where each older grade has a younger grade class to buddy with. For example, my 5th grade class buddies with a 1st grade class. These buddy classes come together to do different learning activities or to just have some fun. So some of the things we've done is we've come together to read writing pieces that we've written to share with a younger audience. We've done Patriot Day activities. We just finished making some holiday gnomes where kids shared important skills that they feel very special about. We collaborated on a Veterans Day poster as well. So these are really great opportunities for kids to build friends across the building and to see each other as leaders. Another way that we build community even in a larger scale is through our Bobcat Bashes. These are about bi-monthly, every other month, where it's a unique situation where each staff member has a team of students that is comprised of everybody from kindergarten through 5th grade. So it's a mix of students. They come together. We start off with some sort of social emotional piece, whether it's a book, a lesson, a conversation in the gym, and we break off into teams where we do different community building activities or games. We've done Minute to Win It games. They've done cards for senior citizens. We've done just get to know you games. And it's a cool experience because that group of kids stays together K through 5. So they can grow with each other, they welcome in new students, and by the time they hit 5th grade, they kind of become the leader in that group. And it provides students a chance to step up, to really show off the things they're learning and to be in a different environment with different students. And we find these are very well received by our students. They enjoy the different games and that it's kind of a constantly moving activity for them.
All right, so that concludes kind of a brief introduction of some of the activities of daily life at Ben Franklin Elementary School. Obviously, beyond our engagement goals, we have our students are really working hard at increasing achievement, increasing growth. Our staff has done an amazing job of adapting to Act 20 changes and different things like that I think we'll start to see some of the fruits of that labor as we continue with our winter assessment period and looking forward. And so kind of attacking and helping students grow socially and emotionally and like their own confidence with the Ben Way, and then coupling that with excellent Tier 1 instruction and lots of great support to help students who need that extra support. And our goals, our goal is to be able to accomplish all of our school goals, whether it's achievement related or engagement related, in this school year. So that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions from the board?
I don't have a question necessarily, but I just wanted to thank you for all that you're doing at Ben Franklin. This just sounds wonderful. And as a parent of 3 Ben Franklin alums, I want you to know that Ben Way does stick with them. I have 2 kids in college, 1 in high school, who will still on occasion talk about the Ben Way, believe in yourself, encourage others, never stop learning. They are 15, 18, and 21, and they are still making those connections. So the things that you're doing at Ben Franklin are, just really like becoming rooted in those students, and they will carry that. They will carry that forward. So
Awesome.
It's great.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for all that you're doing.
Yeah. Sounds like we have some future speakers for our Thursday morning meetings. We love to have alumni back, especially if they're if they can recognize the Ben Way. I'm not sure when that ended, or but be able to bring that back, and it'd be amazing to make those connections. I think for our kids too, so they can see
Just
themselves.
voluntold them.
Yeah, open invitation.
I
Always.
kind of had a question about that. So it's not a new thing that you brought in, because obviously you. So where did the Ben Way, always been there, or?
It was an early PTO meeting, and I think one of our PTO board members, who had a student, that graduated from Ben Franklin, and I'm not sure if they had graduated from the high school yet, but mentioned it, and like, as soon as she said it, I'm like, I think that's the thing. We wanted something that was short, concise, and like, we could repeat every day, and that I wanted to be able to, make sure that I was living those values, and that I could ask any student or staff in the building, like, what do we believe here? And that they'd be able to like answer, those 3 short little things. And we love how it, that encourage others piece too is something that, I think all of our children and staff need, so that directly relates to our, kind of our celebration goal as well, so. I'm not sure when it
started a
went away.
long time ago, but when they first built the building, my daughter and son, my youngest, that was a big thing then too. So, and now that daughter is 36 and Sam is 29, so it's been around for a long time.
Awesome.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
think we have some things and maybe some pictures for.
Okay. But we're still gonna clap. I know, I was we always say as long as you're
I
still
figured you were
coughing,
waiting
you're
until they
breathing.
came back.
That is pretty funny. My email.
You were waiting for you to reply.
Okay. Great, my board docs has changed. I can't get it. That's okay. Thanks, Darlene. Mark, don't give a picture.
They give you medication for that, right?
They do. If somebody has persistent hiccups, there's some kind of medication.
One of Mr. Hine. Even their shoes match.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like me.
Blue's the color of the day, friend.
Yeah, I did.
Here's some snacks. Thanks for coming and being here. It's a long time.
Well, Mara, you have the same colors.
It was fun.
All right, thank you, everyone. Friends of Franklin recognition, Volition Franklin, Mr. Daniels, please, and welcome Mayor Kleinmetz and Officer Wallace as well. Thank you for being here tonight. What's that?
Yeah.
Do you guys all?
You stand by us. Get their hands.
These are the students.
You're all members. It's not for me, it's for everyone. Take a seat.
Mike, you want to join?
So, obviously, we're going to be giving them the Friends of Franklin Recognition Award, but Volition has made significant contributions to the Franklin Public Schools. They've developed the Youth Volition Group at both the middle school and high school. They've collaborated with the district to host family and community sessions with us, and they've also provided valuable professional development to our staff on vaping and drug trends in our community. Mark your calendars, February 17th, they're actually going to be doing that same or similar presentation across the street here to our community and our parents as well. So we're excited about that. Just more great things about Volition, but their impact has extended far beyond our schools. Through their extensive community involvement, Volition plays a vital role in enhancing the overall quality of life in Franklin, which directly impacts our families and our students. So for all of those reasons, and probably so many more that we could mention, we're proud to have nominated Volition for the Friends of Franklin recognition, which we are going to be handing over to them tonight. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna interject here. I feel I can
speak for everyone standing behind me and for the members that are a part of the coalition that weren't able to be here tonight, and just say that we're incredibly honored to receive this award. They say it takes a village, and it truly does. Here it takes a city. So all of the support that we've received as a coalition is truly, the work of the schools, school members. We want to thank Andy Daniels for the nomination. He is a very integral part of the coalition and being able to connect us with the school and with the students, as well as your school social workers, businesses in Franklin, our local law enforcement, students, many more. So very honored to be here tonight and to receive this recognition, and we hope to just continue to do great things with the schools and in the community. So thank you very much.
Congratulations.
More pictures.
You all gotta get snagged into this. I'm not letting anyone get out of this.
You guys gotta come up too.
Yeah, you guys gotta-
Students are a little shy, but we gotta get them up there.
You should be like right. Yeah, you should be holding it right.
All right, everybody tighten up.
2 rows. I'm gonna say 2 rows. Matching shirts.
Perfect.
The
All
bowling
right.
team.
Looking good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We will display it proudly.
They do so much work.
Yeah, they have their.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to community comment. I don't see anybody signed up to comment, but would anybody like to? Please, Mr. Kleinmetz,
If I could.
please
I'm
state your
sorry.
name
I didn't realize I was
for the
supposed to
record.
sign up. I apologize.
No, please.
I'm Fred Clements, 9399 South Cobblestone Way in Franklin. I served for 31 years, 13 as mayor, 18 as municipal judge. So I know all of you are making sacrifices, your families are making sacrifices. I know what it is to do public service, and I'd like to thank all of you for what you do. The one comment I wanted to make, and maybe I'm telling you things that you already know, I don't know if I am or not, but I happen to be a member of Faith Presbyterian Church, which is 3800 West Rawson, and we have a food pantry that serves in the community. And we were running kind of low on food. We were doing, getting towards the bottom of our barrel. We have canned goods and cereals and things like that. And so we asked Pleasant View School to help us out. And maybe you guys already know this might be old news for you, but the students at Pleasant View School raised more than 3,000 items. 3,000 items. We couldn't believe it. Was it 4,000? I'm sorry. She always corrects me no matter what. So that's not the first time. So over 4,000 items, and I don't know whether you ever stopped to think about that, but think about the number of people and the number of families and the number of kids that got involved to raise those kinds of numbers. So as I said, I'm probably telling you something you already know, but I just want you to know that on behalf of other people in the community, we just want to thank those students, that school, the people who are principal and other people in the school, and frankly, the entire school board for something like that. You don't know how many families you affected, how many lives you affected, not just with the food itself. I mean, that's obviously the main thing, the food, but the fact that somebody showed that they cared about these families that are low on food, that perhaps lost a job, families that are having a hard time making ends meet. And I think just as important as the actual food items themselves is the message that goes out to these families that yes, there are people who care about you. There are people who are worried about you. There are people who want to support you. And that's just a tremendous message. And everybody on the school board and everybody that had anything to do with this from Pleasant View School should be so proud of what they've accomplished. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. All right, anybody else care to comment? All right, I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion was made by Mrs. Sapersky, seconded by Mrs. Larson, or?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. School board calendar, the WASB convention is next Wednesday through Friday, the 22nd through 24th at the Baird Center. Key communicators meeting Monday, February 3rd at Forest Park Middle School at 5, and 2 Board of Education meetings in February, one on the 5th and one on the 19th, both at the ECC, both at 6 o'clock. District Administrator update, Mrs. Bennett, please.
All right, good evening. Just a couple updates. So this evening, in a little while, you'll have the first of quarterly updates about our Franklin Forward work since the passing of the referendum. So excited to let you know what's been going on and taking place there. The Better Place to Work Task Force is on year 2. Andy Cromie, Laura Lancor lead that committee. I help with the planning. It was a great meeting last evening. I guess we'll use the word great. There was good discussion around a lot of the wellness ideas that the committee has helped come up with as we continue to look at what does it look like for wellness for our staff? What are some offerings we can have? Laura's done a nice job of continuing to reach out to partners to kind of build that momentum so that we can have our goals, have a nice one-pager at the end of the year or sometime around there of other things that are ancillary benefits to working in Franklin Public Schools. Andy reviewed health insurance with the task force, so going through a variety of the different options that we looked at last year and kind of where we left off with last year's decisions, where we're at currently at about 124% spending, which is obviously a concern anytime it's over 100%, but just sharing that with the task force to kind of give a snapshot of where we're currently at, that we're going to have to continue to look at health insurance and what that may or may not look like in the future, and then get some ideas from the committee and trying to think about what are the top 3 to 5 things that you would like to see when you think about your health insurance. I would say that there was a lot of good ideas that came out of the group, and health insurance is complex. So there were also questions and wonderings just to learn what does it all entail. The music program did informances recently last week. So this is the 10th year, it sounded like, talking to the music directors, that they've invited all the 5th graders to the Saber Center. So it was fun to be there and just see students that have not been a part of a performing arts center before, and just what that feel is like. And then to see all of our high school students performing from orchestra, band, choir, the different groups. And then many of them would speak and talk about what elementary school they went to, what their music experience has been through middle and high school. And it really gives an opportunity for 5th grade, who's thinking about signing up for courses for middle school, or they are started now, to think about what they may be interested in within the music department. So that leads well into course selection. We are at that point in the year where we're half in 24-25 school year, and we are half in the 25-26 school year as far as planning. So middle school, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, next year's middle schoolers, are currently working on selecting their courses for Forest Park next year. High school's already worked on and completed that. What takes place now over the next couple months is building that schedule for next year, looking at what courses students are interested in, what that looks like for the schedule and staffing, and then our team meeting together to kind of work to solidify those schedules or work out some of those pieces. So it's sometimes if you're not behind the scenes in a district, you don't realize that we are already in that step. Summer school information is going to go out, I believe, tomorrow. So it's really moving along, even though we're here in January. Tonight, you're also going to hear from Andy Cromie on one of our first of a few preliminary budget pieces. It looks a little similar to last year's. There's a bit of a deficit yet to pick up, but we've taken a lot of the assumptions on the lowest end, hoping that we get some better answers from the state as they work through the biennial budget. So right now, what you'll hear from Andy with more detail in a bit is that we've assumed a $0 increase in special education. We're assuming the $325 that Governor Evers put in through the veto last year, but we didn't assume anything beyond that. And really working at what are some of the other big pieces, along with just inflation and increased costs in different areas as we look at the budget and start preliminarily discussing it for next school year. And then a few upcoming dates. This Friday is the end of the semester, so that affects our secondary schools, middle and high school. Elementary school's got a few weeks or about a month left of the trimester yet. Also on Monday, we have the family engagement survey going out, so that's open for a week. We'll continue to push it out in newsletters through the schools, through the district newsletter, and hoping to continue to increase our number of parents completing that. No school for students on Monday and Tuesday, so that's just a reminder. Martin Luther King Day is Monday. We honor that as a district. And our staff will also be working on records and having some professional development in their schools during that time. And finally, we have a family information session coming up on January 22nd. It's called Let Me Do It Myself, I Need Help. So hopefully we have a very good family turnout. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends. We've had a great series this year. We've struggled to get people in. I get it, we're busy, but they've been really good and really impactful for those that have been able to attend.
Thank you. Any questions? Please.
I was just wondering, anything you might add on reading implementation and testing and where we're at on that?
So where we're at with testing is January is a big month of assessing. So we'll be doing our Act 20. We've completed all of our screeners, I had to think of that word for a minute, in the elementary schools. With more detail on that and coming up agenda items, not this evening. But working on completing that, so really a shout out to the staff in the schools and our leadership supporting them, as that's been a mandate from the state and a lot of work to get the pieces in place. But also a shout out to our robust EMLSS process that we've been rebooting over the last couple years, because the Act 20 screeners did not find a lot of students that we did not already have identified, that we were already doing interventions for at a tiered level to meet their gaps in learning. So a couple students here and there for sure, but overall it was a kind of a nice celebration that EMLSS is seeing success.
Just mention what that stands for.
That's
Sorry.
the Equitable Multi-Level System of Support. Basically, universal instruction is tier 1, what takes place in all classrooms. And then tier 2 is starting to look at what, in addition, might students need to fill some gaps in learning. Also mostly happens in the classroom, but at a different level. So it may not be what every student needs, but it's more customized to the individual. Yeah, sorry, acronyms are crazy in education. SAVIS is, we have, with the upcoming PD day in schools on Tuesday, the elementaries have a variety of focus areas on just the implementation of SAVIS and the different pieces in the classroom. That continues to be the goal, right? When we talked last May, part of implementing a new curriculum is, it first is working on the adult skills and understanding and getting to know it, and the students getting used to the format and pace of what the learning is, and then over the years you start to really see the impact on the learning. So overall, what I would say is that Jess and I have talked with Amanda Pound, the Director of Teaching and Learning, in the last month about putting something on the agenda for board probably around May. We'll look at what meetings maybe not as heavy as other meetings. And that will be a culmination of what does Act 20 look like? How does that tie with SAVIS and our structure already where we're supporting students? And then also bringing in some policy language that we'll have to adjust on retention that's mandated through Act 20. So we're gonna bring that together as a nice literacy basket, probably around May. We're just looking at which meeting would be the best time for that.
Thank you. Review and discussion of WASB proposed resolutions. So every year, the WASB, part of the convention, each board has one delegate to the convention, in which we take up the resolutions put forth by different school boards. And we should talk about them, if you like, whether to vote yea or nay. At the convention next week, Mrs. Yank is our delegate this year. And this year, most of the resolutions appear fairly straightforward, but does anybody have any in particular they'd like to discuss?
I just want to mention, I think several of these were actually on the agenda last year, and because the meeting went so long, we weren't able to get to all of them. So at least the first, I would say 3 or 4 on the list are actually resolutions that we had endorsed as a board last year, just for what it's worth.
They don't identify them anyway?
They didn't
Okay.
flag them, I just recall. It was a long meeting. People were just leaving, and so there wasn't a quorum after a while.
Please, Matsu.
How many of these resolutions actually make it to the legislature?
This is all, I'm sorry, does someone else want to answer this question? These are all sort of identifying the lobbying work that we are instructing the WASB to take up on our behalf. So it just sort of informs positions and lobbying efforts, but none of these, become actual language in a bill.
They could.
They could, but it hasn't in recent memory.
The last one that I remember becoming a bill was put forth by Franklin for the CRC,
Yeah.
5 years ago.
So this is,
But it
I would
didn't
say,
become law.
more crafting, lobbying, talking points, and position statements.
But cybersecurity is gonna have to be something that, gets taken up.
Yeah.
Certainly, with the power school issues of, recent past, and that seems to be something that's happening. Obviously, school funding is a big issue in the biennial budget, so certainly some of that will be brought forward. And I suspect that that's going to be the large part of what happens this year is advocacy for the state biennial budget.
There was some legislation that I think I think WSB was actually behind it as far as a pathway for paraprofessionals. I think that was.
Yeah, that's
had
a good
some
point.
traction.
Yep.
And we are supportive of that. I don't know what administration would say.
Yeah, DPI is working with the state on that piece. Yeah, I would say we're in support.
There
And
didn't seem to be
maybe
any
Andy can
particular
explain this decoupling of public and private school funding. How would that work exactly?
So the voucher portion of our tax levy that we talk about in each October would essentially be pulling that out, so they would not be transferring that through the school districts to add to the tax levy. There's a whole lot of other issues that go in with it, and do private school voucher schools now move up at the same rate as public education, or is it tied, is it indexed to kind of the same measurement growth? There's a significant amount of dollars that are gonna take to decouple, and I will tell you probably 50-50 on the side of the fence regarding who you talk to, whether we should or whether we shouldn't. I don't have a position one way or another, like I still need to understand more about it, but it's definitely a conversation piece that's out there.
Were you on the SWSA call this week?
I was.
Because that seemed like that was their main point, is whatever happens with it, if it does get decoupled, it's gonna take a lot of money to actually accomplish the decoupling.
Right.
Seemed to be the main message.
So like, right now, that's being put into our tax levy, right?
Right.
And so coming up with those dollars that are being levied now to keep everybody whole
Yeah.
is how that would have to be done. If they don't wanna keep everybody whole, then they don't necessarily need to come up with that amount of money, but like, that's always a sticking point when you change funding in general for schools, is that if there are winners and losers,
Yeah.
it doesn't look great. So trying to make the losers stay whole, or what would, make them whole, even if some winners still continue to win, trying not to have anybody lose is a key component. But that's a really large dollar amount. So for us last year, it was well over $1 million, right? And we're relatively small. I don't know what is for MPS. I'm sure it's extremely large, and Madison probably very large. Green Bay, again, those large school districts probably have a very large voucher addition to their tax levy.
But essentially, the state would have to find that funding.
Right.
And taxpayers would benefit. Because they would come off the levy.
Well,
It
depending where
would,
they
but
find it.
every other program in the state is not just education, probably every other program in the state is suffering. So roads and construction and
Come on,
education.
Andy, work with me here, come on, isn't this a easy sell? The legislature, they have money, we know there's a lot of surplus out there.
Definitely not an easy sell, because every other program in the state will lose.
Oh.
Like everything else in the budget.
And
So
then,
anyway,
could you
this is-
explain that? Because there's surplus, I mean, we know there's money, I mean, we heard that last time, that there was.
Because it takes an enormous amount of money to do this. It's well over $1 billion to decouple. I want to say it's 1.1 or $1.2 billion it would cost.
How long have we had this program in place? I mean, I know it's been growing rapidly, but
Yeah, I don't have the specifics behind it and wasn't prepared to talk about it tonight, so I don't have those with me, but it's been around for a long time. It's actually been open for 2 or 3 years now, and there was at least a 10-year stepping period into it being wide open. So 12 to 13 years we've been into it for sure.
So I guess we're sort of discussing whether we want Mary to vote in support of this language. So just to rewind back to what we're discussing here. Right, I mean.
Right, I think it's a good
Andy
thing,
to
but.
give a lesson
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I think
school
it's safe,
voucher
I think
funding.
it's safe to say that, if we're generally not against anything, we should vote for it, because if we can't even really get into a discussion here about it, the legislature is not going to take that up this year. I mean, maybe they'll take it up in some way, shape, or form, but to Angie's point, are we in favor of this language?
For the decoupling, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I would have.
I agree.
One, of all the ones that we are here, the staff mental health one to me seems a little, I don't know what was the impetus about that. Can you speak to that, the need for that, or how important that is? I mean, everybody who has a job is going to have stress related to things. So to single out school staff to me seems a little much.
I agree with you, Linda. I think it's a mandate without money attached to it, right? So here, do this, and then, how is it? I like to see some sort of, if we're, yes, how are we going to fund this, right?
Or
Maybe we
even how
want
do you
this, but how are we
implement
gonna
it?
fund it, right? That's the.
Well, it seems like so many of these are relatively nebulous.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one
This one's
particularly
really
is to me.
kinda-
I agree with Linda. This is
It's kinda out.
particularly to me.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the priority of, if we were given $100, where would we rank that money in some of these? It might be towards, maybe it's not our top priority, but I do think it is valuable to support staff. I mean, like you said, Linda, every job has some stress to it, that's true. But I think if you look at educators and the things that have changed over the last 5 years or so, there has been a significant change in the challenges that they're facing every day. And so if we could, help support in whatever way it might be, I don't think it's nothing. Do we have the funding for it? Probably not. Is it gonna happen? Maybe not. But I do think there's value in supporting our staff, whether that comes from a state level, or, we're looking at our Better Place to Work and our wellness initiatives and things like that, how we can support our staff that way. But I
always think that the value of some of these statements, even if they are rather nebulous, is that the WSB has sort of takes a position saying we value the mental health of our school employees. And then even if there isn't obviously legislation attached to it when that position statement is written, if an issue were to come before the legislature in which having that position clearly outlined is sort of a point that might be made in supporting something that even isn't directly, at this point, seemingly obviously related to it. Just sort of saying this is one of our value statements. So that if somebody's ever like, well, who cares about staff mental health? Well, the WASB can say, well, our members have indicated that that is an important priority.
I think in this current day and age, mental health is becoming more and more important. And I think if you want a healthy student body, that will only happen if you have a healthy staff body. Mental health, not only physical health, but the mental health of the staff is very, very vital with all the stresses and the challenges everybody's facing. I'm sure that Monday soon we are going to talk about mental health of the board members, but we need to be cognizant of the fact.
I doubt it's going to get a lot of debate, but maybe it will.
Well, and it wasn't obviously created, somebody had to do some level of collaboration or communicate. This didn't just come out of a vacuum, so obviously there must be an issue that they're trying to address, whether it's retention or whether it's job satisfaction or whether it's, effects on students. So, yeah, I mean, these teachers go through traumas when they have to do probably the drills every month or whatever, the shooting drills, or they know somebody whose friend's neighbor was killed, So again, it didn't come from nowhere. I'm sure there's a root causes of why this is in here, because it's one of very few things that we're talking about.
Perhaps there is, but it's not included.
True, yeah, again, very few
All right, well,
details in some
I'm
of these.
okay with you supporting it, but if there's anyone not, are people generally okay with supporting it? Debbie's nodding, yeah, so I think.
Yes, all right, great. Any others that we feel strongly, that people feel strongly about?
Well, I guess I'm also interested in hearing Andy's think, I'm excited to hear that the Blue Ribbon Commission is still around, and that those ideas, are they still valid, or you would also write those off as hopeless, or takes too much money, or whatever? I mean, that was a huge effort to kind of rewrite and level the,
It was a massive effort and it's been set off to the side.
and this is obviously some attempt to bring it back, I guess.
There is. My guess is, given that there was no movement on it, they would look at it and say it's 8 years old. I think it was 2016 or somewhere around there. It's 8 years old, 9 years old. We would want to commission something that's relative to today if we were going to make some moves on it. So while I think it has some validity in the topics it's trying to pursue, the legislature, in my opinion, would say the data is 9 years old. Let's find data that's relative to today and see do those things still hold true.
It should probably remove from the WSAB's book then, if that's how people are, it's a waste of print, I guess. But it'd be interesting to see what they say about it at the meeting, what other around the state.
I guess I'll take
comment.
notes.
Take notes,
My
Mary.
favorite thing
Yeah.
to do in
Great.
life.
So it'd be interesting to see what around the state, how they look at some of these things, so.
Bring snacks, Mary.
All right, so
Are they still using the hands?
No, they've got the little clickers.
Oh, clickers now, okay.
open enrollment seats. Mr. Cromie, please.
Yep, so these were brought to you in December, so you were able to take a look at the numbers that were presented by Ms. Lancour. So again, we take a look at current enrollment, we project that forward, so if we think back to our Franklin Forward, MD Roffers is kind of the long game. And open enrollment seats is a short game, this is like absolute data, projecting number of sections specifically at the elementary level, projecting class size at the middle and high school level, and whatever we have available. Again, we don't want to add staff, but if we have seats available, we're already turning on the lights and we already have the teacher in front. So what you see in front of you by the grade level, and then in regards to special education seat, you'll see we have one, I believe it's in speech and language, correct? Those calculations are done through student services. DPI provides 3 methods. You're able to choose any one of the 3 methods. So Leo and his team managed that particular piece, and they came up with our one in speech and language. So the numbers presented to you are as on paper there.
I move that we approve the 104 open enrollment seats for the 25-26 school year as presented.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Dr. Khan. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Financial audit report, Mr. Cromie, also an action item.
Yep, this was brought forth in December as well. Again, we received a
Clean?
We'll call it clean. I can't think of unmodified opinion, meaning again it is clean. So just looking for approval tonight of this 23-24 financial audit.
I move to approve the financial statements as prepared and presented.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Dr. Khan, seconded by Mrs. Larson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Franklin Forward update. Ms. Bennon and Mr. Hacker, welcome back. So you're bringing up a bottle of wine.
Not in the school I told them I was.
Well, for the record, it's not wine.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Fake bottle.
All right, so Mr. Hacker and I are excited to be here tonight to do the first of our quarterly updates on Franklin Forward. Kind of walk through where we've been since November, since the passing of the referendum, and talk through that. So we have a slide deck that we prepared, excuse me, and you also have a hard copy of it at your seat in case any of it's hard to view. Or if you continue to go back to your referendum binder, this is a great artifact. to add in there for your bookshelf. All right, so, oh, sorry, Jess, I have the clicker, I keep forgetting that. Good to go. All right, so an overview tonight, we're gonna kind of walk through the beginning pieces, which we always ground in our coherence plan and our guiding principles, if you remember those from last year, and walk through some of the design process, our team members, what part of the design process we're currently in, and just what that design process in general looks like, because we will constantly refer back to that when we come back for these quarterly updates. So you'll get well versed in the language and the world of all the building and planning that's going to take place for the next 4 or longer years within the district. Also, we'll talk about how we began the schematic design stage and just getting the voice of a lot of stakeholders and how we're continuing to gain that voice as we move into the next phase of the work. So coherence plan obviously looks very familiar. Dr. Mo just did a mid-year update for us that we worked through together in December. So we're very familiar with it, but the reason that we always ground back in it, and we've even made our partners aware of what it is because this is what we work to gain, but the spaces we have need to meet the demand of what our staff and our learners need to be able to engage, to be able to innovate, be able to move about, especially with so much work at the high school, be able to move about that in a more adult-like fashion, right? They're gonna go to college, which is even starting to look different, and our staff being able to adapt to that. So we'll talk a little bit too about how just having this opportunity, we've really used it as an opportunity to look at the whole high school. So we don't plan for that high school to have any major big looks or touches to it after this work for quite some time, right? So using this as an opportunity to really rebrand. That doesn't mean we're not Sabres. It doesn't mean colors change, but really right now, if you walk through the building, you can see the different eras of that building and when they came into existence. And our goal is that from the Sabre Center to the football field, from the tennis courts to 51st, that it is all united, that when you walk through that school, you understand what learning is about in Franklin and what that feels like. You've probably noted that if you walk through other schools, if you're there for events, some do a really great job about branding and bringing it together. That's our goal with this, really pull it together through the whole building, even the parts that maybe aren't getting a full facelift. The other part of it is thinking about what does learning look like? Where do people and our students in particular feel like they belong? Where do staff feel like they belong? What have we noted with patterns of the usage of Forest Park that have worked well for us and those that haven't, so that we're thinking about the learner's journey through that building and now into the high school. So just today I was meeting with the high school associate principals because they have a very specific lens to things that currently work and don't work in the high school because of the avenue of their work and what they manage and lead each day. So thinking about and just access points, patterns of flow, direction within the building, on top of how are our students collaborating, where are they? So just kind of grounding in that, yes, there's gonna be all this design work and there's gonna be building and moving of dirt and all this stuff, but it grounds back in like really what's best for our learners and what are we doing for them and our staff. Our guiding principles, I know they're small there, you have them large in your binder at home, but just not losing focus that we did all that work for months to build up what does it mean to learn in the system. And so we're continuing to look at those principles throughout our design work.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, going back to your other concepts about branding and how learners feel they belong, collaboration, because we built the wonderful middle school, and all of those concepts I believe are embedded in that building. But did they all work like we thought they were going to work? I mean, did you look at that? Did teachers always respond to the space the way you thought they were? Or?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I said that, but yes, we're absolutely looking at what works and what doesn't work with what the design of the middle school is.
What kind of things did you learn, I guess?
And that's what the team's working on right now, is looking at those pieces. And when the staff's been in that building and when we visited some of our other sites, which we'll get to, a lot of what is working is the collaboration spaces, the visibility to the hallway and some of those other rooms, because learning is not just the teacher at the front of the room instructing any longer. And I think we talked about this a little bit through the process too, maybe not at the board table, but when you walk through the high school, you'll see students sitting in the hallway working all the time throughout the building because they're used to the collaboration space and need that, and that's part of the learning process. And in the middle school, you have the space for that. That has worked well. At the high school, you're not seeing those spaces. So if you walk through those English hallways, on any given day, you're gonna see kids leaning up against the hall, working with partners, even in the rooms, maybe sitting on the floor somewhere because they're trying to move together. The furniture's not even as mobile as what we see sometimes now in the middle school. Some of those special ed spaces we talked about through design, through our visioning too, like they don't exist the same at the high school. So that's something we need to look at in that space as we go into it.
And follow, because I know particularly this project is going to address career and tech ed spaces. And I know at the middle school, the culinary arts area is pretty traditional in terms of that design. It looks like, you know, your home kitchen. So was that a good, we're not going to duplicate that, are we? Or in some of those other career areas, are they working the way we thought? Or in the right spot? You know, the middle school and those areas particularly, are they going to look the same at the high school, or did we learn something there?
Yeah, we've absolutely learned things there, and the spaces will look different, because the learning's different and the learning advances from middle school. So what we have in the middle school is a great room for the learning that's taking place in it for the culinary. You're not teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th graders through their experience how to work in the culinary world in a kitchen or a restaurant, but you are teaching them those basic skills of what they're using at home and safety with the utensils and the cooking and the things they can do that way. When we get to high school, what our early planning is, and what I'll say on the front end of this, because we're a little bit ahead of where the slides are, is that it's a big ball of clay right now, right? It's being molded. So we saw outlines of a phased document, enough to outline like we have the space and these are what we need, this is what we need to look at to go to referendum. But till we had that, you don't get into the real deep design. So that's the work that's going on now, is the discussion and the schematic design work to talk about the things you're asking, like what is working in those spaces, what's different about high school learning than middle school learning, right? We wouldn't duplicate those labs at the high school, we know that, because we're trying to get our high school students ready for culinary world, for restaurant. Maybe they're gonna go to MATC and finish there, what that looks like. But there is gonna be some need yet for high school students to have more of the look of what their everyday is at home and some of those skill sets there. So the early phase discussions and the team, the high school right now is, we're gonna need a mix of both of those, and what does that look like and what's the appropriate amount of space, and also balancing that with the interest. I would say another piece that we've really kept as a guide for us through these early discussions as we start like unfolding that ball of clay is that space is versatile. That let's not be oblivious to the fact that learning looked different 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, definitely 40 or 50 years ago when parts of that building were built that we're still learning in and seeing the struggles. So let's remember it is gonna change, and we don't know all of those things that it will be 20 years from now. So in the spaces we are designing, we are trying to think about that there's versatility in the furniture and the layout of it, that we're leaving it in a way that if learning has to look different in there 20 years from now, it's not taking major overhaul or construction for that to happen. Another piece that the team's being very cognizant of is that we don't have space that's sitting unoccupied during great parts of the day, so that we're not designing a space that's only used after school that we haven't thought about how could it be used through every part of the day. So that's been a lot of the conversation going on in these early stages too, is what that looks like. Our college students, high school students, even if you go on Monday or Tuesday, go to a coffee shop in the area, when our kids aren't in, you're likely to see them there working together. So we're talking about how are you creating those spaces within the high school also to allow for cafe type learning and movement throughout. So I'm happy to take questions. If I get through the slides, it might help answer some of them, and then we can definitely hit questions at the end, and Mike will jump in on some of these slides too.
I can't read anything that's on there, so if you have a larger copy, I'll take it.
It's in our binder, she said. This is directly pulled from our initial binder.
Yeah,
They're
this is
not
just,
all this small.
yeah, this is just the guiding principles, just a review that we're still using them. This is what we've grounded ourselves in from last year.
I just don't know what they are, that's all. So if you have a
Okay.
copy,
Yeah,
just
they're-
share it. That's all I'm saying.
Yep, you have those, thank you. All right, the design process organizational chart. So this is what we spent our first couple meetings of after the referendum going through. So really talking about who is that core planning team, and what does that look like for us. For many of us, that's the core planning team is Andy Daniels, Andy Cromie, myself, Jess Mose in most of those meetings. Mike Hacker obviously is our owner's rep with Cadence Consulting is with us. CD Smith, PRA, we'll talk about some of those partners in a minute. The organizational chart seems like something simple, right? Like, why do you need this? Isn't this obvious? But it's really not, right? So our core team, when we're looking at that referendum planning team, is the group that's meeting bi-weekly for a few hours to talk about, right now, I've said a few times, the schematic design, talk about the phase of the work we're in. On the off weeks, the district administration team is meeting. So Mike might just be meeting as owner's rep with Andy and I. He's having other meetings with the other two Andys related to their field of work. Him and I are connecting on those off weeks also about the flow of the work and all the projects that are going on. The stakeholder user group that's in the top right. So those are the main groups we've identified that are affected by the work that's taking place. And then below that is the stakeholder experts. So for this early phases, we've had all of the educators or any staff working in those departments have had moments with PRA to share their input about what they dream the space to look like, what they feel are wants and needs for that space. As the flow continues going over the next number of years, there will be times that we'll identify experts in those areas, like one representative maybe that's coming in to represent athletics, to represent autos, to represent the woods. So this just helps our team to know who are the stakeholders that aren't at every meeting and when are we pulling them in to be part of the bigger project. So our partners, many of the faces are the same, but new faces to this are PRA has Jeff Peck is our project manager. And then CD Smith has also added a project manager with Phil Jaskowski. So they will be on site with us regularly and main project leads on this referendum work over the next number of years. Also, obviously, Mike Hacker's with us tonight. I'm going to slide over to him for some slides coming up here. So Mike Hacker's what's called an owner's rep. A couple of you have asked, what does that mean? It's kind of in the words. Like he represents us, the district, the board, as the representative of us as the owners of this project. So it's $145 million worth of projects we're taking on over 4 years, on top of full-time jobs and full-time board work. So it's pretty common for districts to bring in an owner's rep to be someone that's that, not just extra set of eyes, but really going through the fine details of if we're going out to bid on projects, like looking at that package and what that is, making sure we're getting viable bids in, going out to talk to the partners that we work with and other vendors that might be looking at coming in to talk about the scope of the project, and make sure we're getting the best for our dollars, that we are not missing certain things. He's looking at all the scope of it. He's helping watch that budget also and documenting that so that we have more sets of eyes in the flow of the money that's going with the project. He can tell you even more about what it looks like, but that's just kind of a high-level overview. And I'm going to hand it over to him now, but I love this idea that Mike brought to our team early on like identifying a space that becomes our referendum workspace. So we've called this the Innovation Hub. If you've been through the high school, you've maybe seen it. It's directly off the common space when you come in the main doors past the office. It's intentionally behind a big wall of glass that you can look through and see us when we're meeting, come in the room and see, as you see on the wall, the design phase projects, the timelines, everything's up there to be viewed. Mike often is up there working multiple days a week too, as he meets with different groups or vendors, but staff at the high school have seen all the pictures of the vendors we work with, our groups, and they know who Mike is and they know they can stop in that room and share feedback or thoughts on the project at any point. So trying to make it a really good ease of contact with the team and knowing the projects that are going on. And I'll hand it over to Mike here to take over.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's good to be here. Good to see everybody. The Innovation Hub is a really exciting space. If you haven't seen it, next time you're in the building, just walk by, take a look in there. The whole concept really is just to have a space that at any time you can be immersed in the project, right? So the most recent floor plans, the most recent renderings, any of the data, the guiding principles are up on the wall, right? So all the things that need to ground the conversation and have the resources ready and available and make that dialogue as efficient as possible. All of our meetings with the design team are in person, so everybody's together in this room. It's kind of roll up your sleeves and let's get to work. The long-term vision then is also, it obviously is the backdrop for not just students and staff walking by, but the team to see those students and staff walking by and kind of feel the energy of the school and the bell schedule and the movement, and it kind of really immerses them in the space. And so there is a TV monitor. That monitor will eventually, once we're ready, have a slideshow going regularly. They'll face out so we can be providing regular updates. We've dialogued about QR codes to get feedback from students on things, and so lots of visions. There was a dialogue early on about it actually being even like a gallery space eventually. So if we have an open house or, you know, a big night where we can open those doors and have folks come in and see updates. And so a lot of opportunity with that. So far, so good. It's working out, I think, very, very well. So I think one of the things that we also wanted to provide as an update on the next slide to the board is just kind of what the next phases look like from a design effort. And a project like this, specifically at the high school, is a multi-year effort, right? By the time we do all the design, all the engineering, and then have many phases of work, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But very quickly, lots of decisions have to be made, right, in that design process. So we got to get our arms around that clay that needs to be molded, look at space programs, meet with staff, engage specialty vendors to come in and dialogue about some of these unique spaces that we have, whether it's a pool environment or a field house, or certainly all the technical pieces that go into a CTE lab. So what you see on the screen here are the three primary design phases that the project will go through. First is schematic design, and Annalee had used that reference a couple times. That's really the phase where the frame of that mold is established. Okay, so we're determining what all spaces are even needed, okay, how large those spaces, how they need to serve, what are critical adjacencies, like from room to room. We're looking at building circulation and site circulation, okay, so making sure we have like basically all the puzzle pieces on the table and start to figure out how they might start to relate to one another. That then, once we're confident that the layout is making sense, we move into design development. And that's where now the walls are starting to become more fixed, and we're starting to work very closely with what goes into those walls, okay? And we start to integrate feedback from engineers and do a deeper and deeper dive into this. And so this process, we kind of think of it as a funnel. Like early on, it's big discussions, big decisions, and then as we go along, they become more and more granular, right? The decisions become more and more detailed as we move through, okay? So going from schematic design into design development, there will be a budget check, okay? So we'll have, right now, and we'll talk budget in just a moment here, we know the budget that has been established for the project. It's been broken down by project area, and we have a lot of detail with CD Smith around each of those pieces. And at every meeting and as the project continues to evolve, we'll have updates from them as checks and balances on that budget. So every decision has a budget impact, right? So we're making sure that as we're making those, everything is staying in alignment, and then our priorities are still as they have always intended to be. So as we get through design development, then we get into construction documents. And that's really where, as you think about traditionally like blueprints from an architect, right? The drawings that have all of the information needed to actually construct the building. That phase is a really, really heavy lift from everybody's part. Okay, all the architectural team members, all the engineers, the contractors are looking at constructability. We're layering in all the owner equipment and decisions that they need to make, furniture information. So a lot of things come together in that phase. And you can see that really starts in July of 25 on the current schedule, and will reach all the way through April of 26. So that's a long window of time that a lot of heavy lifting is going on and detailed work. Again, you can envision, as Annalee noted, kind of this bi-weekly rhythm of these meetings. And as we hit into those, the off week becomes very full. A lot of dialogues in preparation, a lot of recap of things that needed to get addressed. The district's working on making decisions, making sure we're prepared for the next meeting, and then we come in, hit the ground running in those work sessions.
I see in the second phase, you do have city and community engagement. What does that involve and look like?
Yeah, so it's gonna look like a couple things. So one, there absolutely will be a very close and ongoing dialogue with the city of Franklin around the project. Right, this project has, we already have a very full site, and we're adding more to it. Okay, more building, more program, more parking. So we got to work very closely with them on what that looks like and how that works. And so we're going to be engaging with them on a regular basis. We're working closely with Chad and the communications team around how we're providing updates to the community. And early on, it's tough because we want to be sure folks know this is happening and are excited and have updates, yet we don't have a lot of answers yet. Right? A lot of stuff is happening, but not a lot of concrete things yet for people to get excited about. Once we get to design development, we do. We start to see renderings, we see site plans, we have phasing, we can talk schedule, and it gives us far more ability to have more engaged dialogue with broader components of the community. So what that looks like, I think, is still to be determined, but that's usually the phase where we have kind of the content to support those conversations. Okay. So with all of that said, that kind of fits into the budget model. So at this point, the team is working to develop a robust budget model to be managing all of these projects. Okay, and as this slide looks familiar from the pre-referendum work, just to kind of ground the board, is that we have really two buckets of projects, if you will. Okay, so the first one is the capital improvement projects, okay, the $21.9 million CIP projects, which tie very closely to the work that Andy Daniels and his team is managing, the update he provides to the board every year on what we know we need to accomplish and priority projects. Right now, we know that we have investment across the district in these kind of primary areas, but are working line by line on each one of the projects that have been identified to establish a strategy to deliver that project, to figure out what the district can manage on its own as a district direct project versus what we need support from an architect or a construction manager on. We have projects that we know can be addressed very quickly just due to our ability to get proposals and get the work done in this summer coming up. But then we have other projects that strategically are pushed out to the following summer, okay? A good portion of this also is dollars for capital improvement needs at the high school. And since we will be simultaneously doing a significant addition renovation, there's been a lot of dialogue about where the synergies are between those two projects, right? To be sure we're investing in things that are in alignment with the schedule as a part of the broader project at the high school. So a lot of work going on there. So just know, in the background, we are in the process of developing a detailed list, identifying responsibilities, working with both known trusted district partners as well as in the process of developing RFPs to establish new partnerships for certain projects. And I think Andy, in an upcoming presentation in his report to the board, will have more information on how this ties to the long-term plan from a CIP standpoint.
Is bucket number one operating a little leaner and meaner than the second one? In other words, is it going through all of the same management cycles at the Innovation Hub as Project 2?
Yeah, I describe Andy as lean and mean anyways, so
100%.
yes, for the record. No, it is, right? I mean, by design, if it's a district direct project, it is one that we're not, in this case, utilizing Plunkett-Racich or C.D. Smith to support. So the district then has the ability to target a strategy to get that specific project done. Sometimes it would be maybe bidding roofs at multiple schools at the same time to get them all done in the same summer with the same vendor. Other times there are strategies where we have a partner that does, say, all of the security technology work across the district, and they already have a plan. That's how we established this need. We're going to work with them now to implement that and get it done within these projects. So the quick answer is yes,
Okay,
right? It
thanks.
allows us to get that done. Okay.
What's really nice with it too, I would add, is that CD Smith's been a great partner, so they're constantly telling Andy, like, all right, when you're looking at the scope and deciding the projects, if they have, workers that can help out with it, or they maybe know other companies to reach out to in that process, like, it's been very reciprocal that way, so that's exciting to have a partner that's offered that in this process too.
And then, sorry, Linda, please.
So in the area of career and tech ed, we have these areas identified. What's going to be happening to horticulture areas? Because that's always been part of Franklin. And I mean, we even had a student come back and say that's what their current company is. Is that going away, or what is happening with, we have a greenhouse, and I know
Yeah, so the greenhouse will be affected in the projects because it's in the scope of the space that we have, but it's still gonna be looked at, where would it go? None of the scope of this work is gonna reduce any programming that we currently have. and it's gonna continue to look at how can we increase pathways. We don't have a huge horticulture or agricultural pathway right now, but we've had conversations about how do we increase that? We haven't had a lot of student interest, but there's some, and is there an avenue there to increase that? That's conversations that are going on more in the teaching and learning world with it. But none of the scope of this project is reducing in any area.
Is it addressing the space at all? I mean, I'm not even sure what spaces we have now for that, other than the greenhouse, but.
Right, so
I mean-
that's all in the, Holly's talked about, there's a space study that's going on right now with this clay, we're building that outside of it, that's part of that square footage that we're thinking about, what's currently allocated there, what are we looking at for that square footage moving forward?
So when we see schematics, we'll see an area that's gonna have horticulture on it, not just the items that are currently listed, but that will be part of that.
If that's in the scope of work, if that's a space that we currently have, or in a pathway that we're looking to extend.
Well, we do, right? Have that?
We have some classes in that area, but that is not a very extensive pathway that we currently have.
Not a clear answer, but thank you.
So if we have a greenhouse, we will be looking at how we are recreating a greenhouse. The one we have won't exist because it needs to come down throughout the project, right? So there will be a greenhouse. Maybe I'm not understanding your question otherwise. We don't have a separate aquaponics or hydroponics classroom right now. That's something that's in the scope of conversation, but we're not going to build it if we don't have an interest in it. So there's multiple parallel conversations that have to take place. So when you ask and say I'm not answering your question, I just want to be clear that that's a space that doesn't exist, but it's part of the conversation at the table of, is that an area, while we have the opportunity, that we want to be looking at? But there's not huge horticulture spaces at the high school right now.
There's no nursing space right now either.
But there's an interest in it. And I think what I'm getting from this is, if we're asking to know what the blueprint looks like right now, it's too early. They're determining, correct me if I'm wrong, that's what I'm getting from your presentation.
Correct, there's not a blueprint yet.
I'm just saying I don't want horticulture to fall off the table. That's why I make a note, because it's not listed there. And I am aware that we had a student come back, share their story. That's what he's doing for his business. It's not something that's not a current occupation, so I don't want it to get left out.
Yeah, so no programming that we currently have is going to be lost in this project.
Thank you.
And then the second bucket is the $123 million that's directly tied to the addition renovation at the high school. And that is a combination of all of the planned new construction as well as the renovation to that, the site improvements around that support not just the programming but the addition portion of the project, as well as equipment and the furniture and the stuff that's got to go in to fulfill and outfit those spaces that are new and that we don't have today. And so again, that budget is in development. There are a lot of things we know, and there are things we're working on developing. We know that we're gonna need to invest in some abatement in the building. So we're working with a partner to identify what we know and what we don't and how to study that. We know that we're gonna need some specialty equipment. Again, we're looking for the right partners to help establish and refine those budgets as we know enough information in the plan. So very positively positioned today, and look forward in upcoming sessions as updates to provide more information on the budget as we go forward. If we thought the last one was small, this one is very small. So this is a snapshot of the construction schedule, and obviously for a project of this complexity and this duration, there's a lot that goes into not just the phasing, but the duration of time it takes. So this clip, which you have a link to in the doc, will allow you to open up the C.D. Smith schedule. So this is how a contractor thinks about this, which is really as straightforward as we need to get this thing built. How would we go about phasing this and moving equipment and making that happen? Critical, but most of us, when we look at this, it just looks like a bunch of bars and a lot of detail. So share it so you have confidence that that's there, but then we've generated another version of this to help us understand how does this impact the planning work and the impact on operations in the school, okay? And so what you see in this chart is the yellow bar is just our months in years, same duration as what the last timeline looked at. As you go down, then we identify the phases of work that are demolition, like mass demolition where we're taking parts of the building down, the portions that are new construction where we're building new areas, renovation, and then our site improvements. So what we tried to do here is break this down in a way that if we are thinking about how we're operating, how long do we have to function within a space before it goes away, right? We have to have a temporary home or another strategy for that. A perfect example, so essentially every one of these, the black bars you see on the bottom half, correlate to work that's gonna be ongoing somewhere on the site. Okay, so as soon as this fall, we see demolition starting, okay? So, and then we see a long bar in the new construction where kind of the field house piece, which is a large construction, starts, and that takes a long time. And is gonna start where essentially we don't have anything currently today. So it doesn't necessarily impact directly our planning. But then, I think if we click, we should see that box pop up there. If we look at that summer of 2027, all of those black bars start overlapping, right? So that summer is gonna be pretty wild out there, okay? And so we just know that that's a pretty critical window from a district preparedness standpoint. How is this gonna impact us? What can we host on that site and, or maybe not? All of that is what will keep CD Smith up at night in their planning work, right? Because they also know that school stops one day and then a few months later starts again. And all those things have to happen in that window of time, okay? And so with that, I know, Annalee, you wanted to make a couple points on a dialogue about school
Calendar,
schedule.
yeah. So summer 2027, when you can read the top of it, that's very much how it affects the district, and it just says very busy. So it will be very busy, like likely a lot of things that take place at the summer. The high school in the summer won't that summer. But we'll also look at the calendar for the school year leading up to that, 26, 27, and then the following school year, 27, 28, and probably apply with DPI to be able to start maybe after that September 1st start date that's in law, and maybe end a little bit earlier, like adjusting the schedule that year. So still having teaching days, obviously, but optimizing the amount of time we have for that summer, and then also making nice with Mother Nature so that hopefully CD Smith doesn't have ulcers from being held up that way. But that's some of the ways it'll affect it. Some other effects of this you see are, we know, and Cordell's already working with figuring out a partner for swim, because we're probably displaced for about 2 seasons, with the high school pool being demoed and then the time frame for it to come back in. So we'll find a partner for that. And then we're also looking at it, just starting to, is when our classrooms displaced. For the most part, we should be able to move them about in the building through this to make it work. But autos might have some disruption in there too, when you really look at this close and you see when they need to get moved and when our other construction has to come in. We might have to find a partner for a couple months in that area, or think creatively about how we schedule and what we're doing with the students during that time period. So small pains, but for a bigger scope of what we'll have down the line.
Yeah, and we met with CD Smith this week for the first time to formally start to look at their site logistics plan, right? Which is a fancy way of saying like where their fences go and where their cranes, how they're gonna get construction traffic to and from the site. And obviously paramount is student safety and staff safety amidst all of this, but also logistically, how do we get 20+ buses on and off of this site amidst all of this happening? And all of that ties back to this. So hopefully, again, reassuring the board that a lot of really thorough dialogues as early in the process as we can are starting to happen, so that as we're making decisions, everything is queued up as much as possible.
Is the access that's going to be at the east end, that's going to be gained through that neighborhood, that will not be, will that be used for construction traffic?
Yeah, we're not prepared tonight to say if it will or not. Right now, we're very mindful of the neighborhood that's adjacent, and certainly respect that. And we're also mindful of a connection that's not there today. Right. When this project's done, that will be there. Yeah. And the dialogue that's forthcoming around what that might mean. So not ready yet tonight to say that. The initial dialogues, though, have been, because as you might imagine, a project of this size, it's a lot of heavy equipment. Cement trucks and precast and cranes, and those don't fit down residential streets all that well in the first place.
Good point.
And so they don't love roundabouts either, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So I think just know that all those things are on the table for how we're looking at this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Maybe it's a naive question, but the first demolition which I see is from October to November, and the school year is going on. any strategies about noise pollution for the kids? Because if demolition is going on, construction is always noisy and all that, especially demolition is noisy. So is it especially on the weekends or during the evening hours or?
Yeah, no, it'll be during the day, and that'll be a key part of the planning work that we're doing. I think to set expectations, there will be some disruption. Hopefully it's a temporary inconvenience, and certainly we will work closely with Mike, the principal, and his team around testing schedules and critical quiet times. That's very common in this work. The reality, though, is that demo, that's about 1 month, right? So it's in the picture of this long bar, that's pretty quick. But with that then comes all the other work that starts to happen out there. And so will there be some disruption and noise and dust? Yes. We've set some very clear expectations with CD Smith that there is a firm line, physical wall that all construction happens on one side, education is on the other. Those two things do not blend together. We don't have students moving through uncontrolled construction zones. We don't have contractors walking through the building unescorted, anything like that. And so, but with that said, will there be some noise? I think we should expect that there will be, but we will continue to work closely with the principal and their team to manage as best we can. Okay. And then this slide, we wanted to provide a more detailed update to where the evolution of the schematic design is going. And I think Annalee's reference to still a mold of clay is I think very true. So what you're seeing here probably looks similar to what we've seen in some of the early pre-referendum graphics and master planning graphics. This represents all the puzzle pieces, right? We talked about those big pieces being on the table. They're all here on the table, but we are still studying closely, are the adjacencies right? Is our access to certain spaces correct? Do we have critical accessibility components built in as we know they need to be or not? And so this may continue to evolve. So the next time you see it, we may have some things flipped and the team may look at some alternative versions of this, but I think that's still very healthy. This is the time to do it. And then as we go forward, it'll lock in and look more consistent meeting after meeting as we go forward.
Can we see what those numbers mean, or?
Yep, yeah, the teeny tiny text in the bottom left there, that's the key for those. So we can pull those out and provide those. That was it was more just to show you a graphic of the components. But yeah, they're on the larger plan and on the slide. But we can provide that as a follow-up.
I can put it in the Friday update.
Yep, that's not a problem.
Can I just ask about 1 and 2 on top? What are those?
That's the tennis courts and parking that's adjacent to it.
Okay, it looks quite different than I remember any of the prior ones, but okay, thank you.
It's a lot, it probably does, like, 2 would have maybe looked more square on the prior plan,
Right, like a little square.
yeah, kind of, well, yeah, so kind of to Mike's point, like, the clay's continuing to be molded, now you can get into more of the square footage, we're using the feedback that we're getting from staff to continue to look at what do all these spaces need, what do they need to be competitive, so that's part of the discussions going on about the tennis courts.
Yeah, and that side of the building, if you're not familiar, has a lot of grade change. There's a lot going on back there in terms of topography and movement and site access. So that will continue to take some time to massage to be sure we are maximizing and obviously limiting cost impacts associated with those.
There was obviously it's an existing building, so there's been site work that's been done over the years to see what it'll support and whatever. Does that have to be replicated, or is it mostly in the south east corner where the new stuff is being built, where we would have to do some site work, or is there any at all that needs to be
So 2 things. One, we have a survey, a site survey being conducted right now, and that's for the entire property because we have to understand exactly where all the topography is, where all the stormwater goes. That's a requirement.
Where the pool water is draining in.
It's just mysteriously disappearing too. So that's ongoing, okay, and for that work, they're getting elevations and documenting utilities and concrete surfaces. They did some drone work during the break when students weren't around to get accurate aerial elevations, and they're doing work in the courtyard. So that's a very comprehensive analysis. So that's piece 1. Piece 2, once we have the footprints in place during design development, we will be doing soil exploration, so geotechnical reports. So we'll have teams out there actually drilling down, pulling samples of that soil to tell us two things. One, how much weight can it hold? And then in areas of the site, how much water and how quickly that water can dissipate through, because that'll impact our stormwater management. So yes, quick answer again is that that needs to happen. The district has done a lot of investment on this site, and we're leveraging all those prior reports and knowledge. All of that's been provided to the team, and we're building on that for the new information we need.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Sorry, Mary. Email me the question and I'll get to it at a further time. Go ahead, please.
All right, so we've referenced a little bit some of the beginning work that we've been able to do through the schematic design is engaging with staff. So December 2nd, we had a full staff day, PD day, sorry. So we aligned some tours, 2 tours took place. So a lot of the CTE staff went to Muskego, Tosa, MATC, Oak Creek, Franklin. So they had facilities, especially in the areas that we were looking at for the referendum work, just to see what they were about. So before we were asking staff exactly what they want, some of our staff have only taught here, some have been in other places. So explore and think a little about and talk to people in other districts about what's working, what's not. We also had the athletic/culinary group, since one of our culinary educators is also a coach at work, to go together. And they went to Beaver Dam, which has a similarly sized field house to what we're going to be putting in, and then also to Germantown, who has a similar size or look to their pool and some of the culinary spaces in both of those areas. So that was ahead of doing staff listening sessions that PRA held December 12th, 13th, and 17th. So we worked those in towards times that the teachers were available in their workday at the high school. So I know it's always popular to want to go to a tour, and I wasn't able to tour this day either, but I found that the pictures have given me a very good idea of what I maybe missed walking through. So we wanted to provide a few of those to kind of give idea of, you know, what are the things that our team is looking at and discussing, and how is that as we begin and keep molding to what is that going to look like that suits the needs of Franklin. So part of the athletics, obviously we're looking at a pool, still kind of continuing that discussion around 8-lane, but also diving and what does that look like, what's best for athletes, learning from some coaches and experts in that area. The top right is locker rooms. So there's some really interesting locker room setups, right, where it's not just 2 locker rooms, but instead it's a couple team locker rooms, and as sports change, the locker room changes over to the next sports team. So not necessarily maybe designed for girls locker room, boys, but okay, lacrosse is going on right now. This is the lacrosse locker room. When that season's over, it gets flipped. It's the next athletic season. So again, that versatility with space, and also the organization and storage of things. You see the Beaver Dam field house in the bottom, really they're standing on the track. So that being a new addition that we'll be able to have with the indoor aspects, a lot of discussion there on what they've needed for hosting indoor meets. And things along those lines, and then weight rooms. So visited a couple different weight rooms to look at size, to look at space, to learn how they've adapted those for community to use. Because another big piece that we've talked about a lot in our team, besides versatility and planning for the future of learning, has also been how are we gonna make the space open and available to community. So even in our preliminary weight room conversations, is there a portion during the day that would be available or outside the day for community members to utilize that space, or the track within the field house? So keeping that always in the front of our mind too, of like where are we having opportunities for community to be able to use the space. Culinary, obviously that looks very different than the culinary labs that you've been in at the high school through the tours, but also looks different than the middle school, to Linda's point. So these are ones that represent more what we would see in restaurant, right? In our students that were preparing to go down a field or a career path in that area. The top right is a cafe that's in one of the schools we visited. So here it goes with the culinary lab, but then it also becomes the cafe that's open to the students during the day or during sporting events. So we're trying to find a lot of opportunity where we can get some of that live action of our students using the skills they have during our own activities that are going on. Autos looks quite different probably than the space you've stood in at the high school too. So different lighting, ventilation, the space just in general, the variety of equipment to use, the updated equipment sometimes for just vehicles that we have now, right, with more electric. So a lot of things we talked about when we were doing our touring to talk about what the needs were in the referendum. This was going out and seeing how some of that's been addressed in different areas. Same idea with construction in woods, right? You're just seeing some bigger, more well-lit spaces, cleaner, more movement to the space. I think that's a really key piece that stands out in construction in woods, especially that they have the ability to build in there and tear down. It's just kind of a big open space that's flexible, like an indoor playground for them to learn each day. Here's some of the other spaces. Upper right's a CNA lab that one of the districts has, so looking at what could that look like for us. Upper left is those, it's hard to tell in the picture, but what you're seeing is a screen that has a camera in each of those welding rooms that goes down that kind of hallway. So a safer welding environment, again, much different than what you see at the high school right now. But the safety of those cameras and things for the educator to have a view in there without being in that space and in an unsafe way as those sparks are flying. And then the bottom is kind of that versatility of space. So that's an area high school where they kept those halls very wide. This is the whole CTE area. There's some garage doors that open in there so that students can bring out into that hall, maybe to display work they're doing. They use this space for robotics. So if you've ever been a part of robotics league, it needs a lot of space. So they made this where classes can kind of spill in the hall, robotics can come in and do this, use the space. And just a little bit further down that hall, they actually have a courtyard on the left, and they have garage doors, and the autos bay is straight in. So the autos could drive through over that hallway and into the courtyard if they wanted to work out there, or construction more so can come in there and work on building different small projects within that courtyard. So kind of just some neat opportunities and things to see for the team.
And I'll just
Yeah.
hit real quick, obviously a lot of these are peer districts, right? So we talked Muskego and Oak Creek, Beaver Dam, but folks that had just recently completed. So what did they do, what worked, maybe even more so what didn't work, lessons learned in some of that. So a lot of value in those. We also were very strategic about the MATC target in that might be a direct path for some of our students, but they also had a lot of recommendations on what they would like to see students ready for when they step into their program. So what are some of the things we're planning around? So a lot of really healthy conversation observed between those staff members around that. We have a tour set up next week at Marquette for their new wellness center. So again, we're trying to think outside the box just a little bit to be sure we're also seeing what we want our students ready for when they leave here. Not necessarily trying to replicate all of those environments, but are there some things that we can do, things that fit into our goals and curriculum and guiding principles that would better prepare them? So just wanted to note that as well.
Very good point. So following those tours, we got some information from staff that day, but these are the meetings that PRA held. And these are just some of the high-level talking points that they shared from it, but staff's been amazing, which doesn't surprise us, but very optimistic, very flexible in their thinking, and very collaborative in how they're talking about how they want the space to be, how inclusive they want it to be for all of their students' needs. And they've just been they stop back in the room often and share more ideas. One of them even drew up a CAD drawing of exactly what they want the classroom to look like. Obviously, there's some whiteboard drawings that aren't quite as high-tech, but really interested, invested in it, but it's been really positive conversation around what that can look like. And it's not the end there with PRA talking to the staff. They're going to go back and talk with them. I think they said around the end of February when they get a little closer to design to really hone in on like, are we hearing and kind of getting into what you're thinking you want. That's when you start to have these want and need conversations, right? There's points where some things can happen and some can't. And then PRA will meet with them again, I believe it was around April or May, when they're more through the design and they're sharing kind of that final and getting final reaction or any little tweaks that may still come through, but close to this is where we're at and this is what we're moving forward with. So that only includes the staff. So we want to include a lot of stakeholders. So we've talked about what does that look like for learners, for parents, for the board, for alumni. We had a lot of great alumni we heard from throughout the process of talking about pre-referendum, and just community members. So Mike actually came up with this great idea of how we can capture that through video. You know, it's going to be harder to get stakeholder groups in and talk to them. So we've started formulating some of the questions you see on the screen, and a process to which we'll push out for people to hopefully record a quick video or send in writing how they would answer these questions to give to PRA so they can include that during this schematic design phase. And then also to be really great artifacts to have, you know, a few years down the line when the project's finished. Like if we can get a fifth grader thinking about what's high school going to look like for me, and then they're the first group that's walking through a finished high school, having some of those timestamp moments also. So that's part of how we're gonna take the next step to collect feedback and thinking as we move through the project or through the design part. So Chad's gonna be here February 19th at 5 p.m. I challenged him to put his own name in his slide as much as he could, so he did. But we thought if you want to do the video and make it easy, if you want to come in around 5 or anytime between 5 and 6 that board meeting night, Chad can be here and record that. Obviously, you can type things up or send a video in any format, but that's the moment to capture, or one of the moments that we can capture some of the board thoughts on the process moving forward. That's all that we have, but then any questions or wonderings?
Mary, please.
I might have asked this before, it might have been asked and answered, but to what extent are we able to incorporate a green, whether it's solar panels or whether it's, just something that's gonna save us money in the long term and be more eco-friendly? I mean, is that a piece of any of this?
It is, yeah. So a couple approaches there. One, directly to our architects and their engineers that's a goal, right? Whether that's active things like solar panels or passive things just in the efficiency of the systems and the insulation and everything. So that's step one, is being sure we're communicating that, which we have to date. Next week, Andy Daniels, Andy Cromie, and I are scheduled to meet with Focus on Energy from the state to start to talk about their grant program and some of the incentives they have as a part of that. And so we're going to be doing that. Out of that conversation, likely will come any larger opportunities, whether we seek those or not, around solar arrays or green roofs or things that are more significant efforts. We'll learn about any incentives to support, approaching those types of things. But that'll be a great conversation to set the stage for continuing to push that forward as well. But we'll continue to dialogue as we go forward.
Great,
Will,
thank you.
will that primarily be looking for grants, or will there be a focus on really making energy efficient? I mean, this is one chance you get to do that.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of working with Focus on Energy, is that they do an energy model for the building, and then they make recommendations on tweaks within the design, right? Adding more insulation or an energy recovery wheel or things that'll improve the system that's there. And then any of their recommendations that have a cost impact, meaning if you put that energy recovery wheel in, it's gonna cost $20,000 more, they'll offer incentive or offer a path to potentially consider a grant to help support and offset that increased cost. So yeah, the benefit of that is that we are working with the architects, their engineers, to develop the data to support the model. Focus on Energy will develop the energy model. We'll know from them how will the building perform? What will the energy, how will that compare to the benchmark buildings and code standards? So we'll know right away from them, is the building that's being designed, how does that meet the standards and benchmarks just right out of the gates? And then they'll have some recommendations for opportunities for incentives.
I would hope that would be some communication theme throughout the project. The public would probably be very interested in what kind of investments we are making here.
Sure, absolutely,
What the payoff would be. I just have one other question or comment on the organizational chart. If you could go back to that chart. So, you're here and we're reporting to the board, and we're gonna have quarterly reports, but I don't see the board. Where does the board fit in this structure?
Yeah, so that very top box is the Board of Education. So right now, how this is envisioned as a very simple form is that the district administrative team, which is the team that is here with you, and reports directly to the board. Much of that team makes up our core planning team, but essentially our designers, the folks in that bottom circle there, architects, PRA, the CD Smith team, they need direction, right? Every decision, somebody's got to give them direction on what that decision is, and that's really the core responsibility of the core planning team, or the CPT. That then, the CPT obviously is made up of admin, but the admin from a formality standpoint is what ties directly to the board. The district has responsibilities, and we'll have vendors like surveyors and geotech that the district hires directly. Those folks don't work for PRA, right? So they feed directly to the admin team, as well as Cadence Consulting. But then we also wanted to show, obviously, how the stakeholders and our subject area experts kind of fit into kind of all these pieces as well.
I wanted to just say that thank you for outlining what is an extraordinarily complicated process. And it's so tempting to want to get to the next step and see what the final decision is going to be. But I appreciate you showing us your process and the thoughtful approach you're taking to get all the right people at the table. And it's not going to be any one person's pet project. It's going to be what's deemed best by the team as represented by all of the different stakeholders who are coming together. So I appreciate that. And is this your full-time job at this point, or are you managing another project now?
This is a primary one,
Oh, okay.
for sure,
I was
yeah.
just curious. I was just
Yeah,
curious.
no, this is such an opportunity, obviously, right? This significant of an investment.
Yeah.
Although a year seems like a long time for design, in reality, it's gonna go very quickly. And there are lots of decisions that we need to make, and one of my core goals is just that the leadership team is as prepared to make those decisions as possible.
And I've heard anecdotally from several educators who were involved in your early thing, and they very much appreciate how early they've been asked their opinion and being involved. So
Excellent.
Good job. My chair is like sinking to the floor.
Mike has a great team behind him too. I guess we always like make you the face of Cadence, but he's got a data analyst on the backside and some other employees that he works with too that are feeding into the project. So sometimes it's good to know that.
I'm gonna piggyback on what you said in terms of like seeing all the pieces and how it's all working. I actually really appreciate the focus on these like flexible spaces, how it might not just be the autos lab, but how that allows space for robotics or, just the different multi-use spaces. Because you think about the experience that our students have in high school, particularly, where, you might be in your core classes, but maybe you're part of, to Linda, to your point, the eco club that meets after school sometimes and does different projects horticulturally. I'm going to just tag on your language there. That might not be something that you do for the rest of your career. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But like to be able to have that flexibility and all those spaces, we're not just making we're not just making a nursing classroom, but maybe you're going to take a class in there and that's going to lead to something else in your life, or you're going to use that space differently. I think that flexibility of using the space for multiple different things and having that open mind is really, just really helpful. And now I'm like rambling a little bit, but Linda, the alum that you were talking about, the horticultural, I believe, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think he started out in pharmacy school.
Correct.
And so it's not even that he had horticulture in high school as a class necessarily, but he had the exposure to different opportunities to be able to lead him to get to that point, So just, it's not, I know when I was growing up, you did this and you were in this box and you did this. And I really appreciate that what we're offering our students is this more broad opportunity to explore all different options and that we have that space to be able to offer those opportunities.
Another question I would have is, you are talking to stakeholders. The board is not one of the stakeholders. I do recall though, when we did the middle school, when the overall project was kind of, there was a session with the board in terms of what should this school look like, because you talked about the branding, because this is our chance to make the high school something that's going to says something. And is the board going to get some kind of look at that to say, or is it too much glass, too much, there's a look and feel to a building. And how is that going to ultimately be determined? I don't know I've seen some of these renderings, but do we know if we like that or want that? Or, who's proposing that? Do we have a chance to react to that and say, no, that's not what we're looking for?
Yeah, I think the step one for that is the video work, because what want to start with are what are the aspirations of the board? Like, what is the vision? What are your goals as individuals that have been elected to hold this role? We're going to take that content, from all the different stakeholders in those videos and prepare that in a way that everybody can see it. It'll go on the website, absolutely go to the architects. It'll become a part of their filter for how they're helping craft the story and the vision behind the architecture that's there. But I think there will be ample opportunities for everybody, community members and certainly school board members, to react and respond to the architecture once it's there and ready for feedback, right? Today, it's not quite ready for that feedback yet, but eventually we'll have renderings, we'll have floor plans, and we'll be in a position to gather additional feedback as we go forward. What that looks like and what night that meeting is, that's all to be determined, but I'm confident there will be those opportunities.
I think it would have been beneficial had the board been invited to go on tours. In the past, when we had building projects, the board was always invited to go on tours and see, just like Linda's saying, like, do we like all that glass? Do we like this? Do we see this? Do we understand that? Do we understand the process in that? And I think that that's a missing piece right now. So if there are any further tours, I think board members should definitely be invited to go along on those tours and see what you're looking at. It helps us to understand, and as you just said, we're selling this to the community, and we can't sell it to the community if we haven't seen it, if we haven't felt it, if we don't buy into it ourselves. And I think that's a real big missing component. It is for me right now, as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this and I'm watching this and I'm saying, to your point when you said, oh, I see board members there, or Board of Education on the org chart, I don't really feel a part of this.
Understood.
I really don't.
Yeah, and also we've discussed having multiple tour opportunities. Sometimes when you tour right away, we're just looking to gather.
And I understand that. And like, I'm the longest sitting board member here, and I've been through building projects before, and we've always been included. Just as Linda said, we've had sessions, we've been on tours, we've gone to see things, we've offered input. I'm not necessarily sold on handing in a video and saying, here's what I like, because how can I say what I like if I haven't seen what the new things are out there?
Yeah, understood. That's great feedback. I appreciate that.
I would just echo, like, that's one of the first tours. I understand the frustration, but part of that day was moving fast because it was a day staff didn't have students.
I understand, but I mean,
Invited.
if we were invited, we can move fast too. I'll tell you, it's a little heart-wrenching when you're at an event, a district event, and I'm hearing from different people, oh yeah, I toured here and I toured here, and I think to myself, that's nice. Didn't even know there were tours. It's frustrating. It really is. Because we do have to sell this to our citizens. We are representing our citizens. So I think that moving forward, I'd like to see the board included more and invited more and part of the process more.
And I guess I want to understand the video part. I mean, this is just new age stuff that we get in front of camera and tell you what we're saying. I mean, I'd be more comfortable writing it, but
Which is an option.
You can sit down and do an
I know you
interview
can, but I
and
just
talk
wonder how
about
you
it.
arrived at that, hey, we're going to do a video. Is this
I think
just?
it was an effort to gather as much feedback as efficiently as possible. Like, we can set up meetings and invite the community in, and if we get 2 or 3 people, well, sometimes that's a good night. If we do something like this, we may get 20 or 30 video, and it's a way to an alternative approach to gathering as much feedback in terms of visions and goals. I think the video exercise is an attempt to not specifically get feedback about architecture even. Like, we're not asking, what do you think of classrooms with 4 walls or carpet in these space? We're saying, what are your aspirations for your student? Right? We want the emotional side from parents on how they define success for their student in the building, so that we can pull from all of that to be sure that we don't have any blind spots in how we're approaching this, that we haven't asked staff about specific space types or experiences their students are having. So I'll pause that. So the video, I think, was an alternative strategy to be sure we had an opportunity to hear from staff. I think pre-referendum, we sat down a number of times with some folks that have been in the community a long time, right? We're alum many years ago, and we're telling great stories of pride of when the first additions were going on to that building. We got to find a way to capture that, right? And capture those stories and find a way to figure out how, when we talk about branding in this building and talk about the pride of being a Sabre and what it means to be in this community, let's be sure we have an opportunity to tell that story, whether it's through some history component, whether it's through utilizing certain logos or color, whatever that is. We got to figure out how to capture that, so that it wasn't just one night 2 years ago, right? It is something that gets interwoven into our process. So the hope was that we had a document that we can use to share with our design team, but also then communicate out to the community of, what we're hearing and how we're reacting to that.
I think it's kind of a clever idea too. I mean, there are plenty of people who can't come on a random Tuesday night at 6 o'clock to a meeting to share that kind of information. So to have that total flexibility of, do it on your own time and send it to us. And I think probably 9 out of 10 people are pretty confident with how to work a video camera, not a video camera, like your cell phone, whatever, to make a video, or if you don't want to send in an email, but to just have that, just that like open door. You don't have to come on Tuesday night because we're having a meeting at the Saber Center at 6 o'clock, and if you miss it, too bad. It's available anytime. And that historical is almost like a time capsule.
An archive.
Yeah.
Some of it was off of the data of listening sessions throughout pre-referendum, right? I think the most we had at a session was like 5. So we weren't getting them there, so how do you think creatively and differently? And I would say, to your point, Debbie, I'm sorry that you weren't on those tours. That's something we can do, and be more included doesn't give me details to what that looks like. So we're gonna do quarterly updates. It's gonna follow a similar format. Obviously, there'll be more detail as the project goes on. If the board's needing more than that, it's gonna be better to know on the front end what that expectation is so that we can make sure we build it in. It should feel inclusive, right? We're answering to the community's vote to move forward, and so if there's something we need to do, we just need to know what that is.
Well, Annalee, you did mention you want, upfront, if we want information, and, I haven't seen what the budget material's gonna look like, but I am interested in that, and it'll be important to me to see some of those sub-project budgets and then how they come in, because there's always gonna be variances and movement, and I expect that, but I wanna know how it's shaking out.
Understood? Yep.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, proposal for, thank you,
Thank you.
Mike. Proposal for additional SRO position, Mrs. Bennett, please.
All right, so the materials were in the packet in regards to adding an additional SRO. We currently have one in district, and so the last 2 years, we've worked with the Franklin Police Department to bring back the adopted school officers in the elementary. That's just on top of their regular patrol. It's not an actual SRO, but trying to give more connection to some of our administrators to a different officer, because Amy, our current SRO, is stretched. So often when she gets calls from elementary schools, she's maybe not the one that's able to respond or get back to them right away. Often it's a patrol officer that's on. So we've come up with a few creative ways to try to build in support. And it also helps when you have an SRO, they know and understand the school system, and they're learning about it, and they're learning students. So that connection's a little different than calling in a patrol officer that's maybe not as affiliated with the schools on a more regular basis. We have worked with the Franklin Police Department also to a question that Linda submitted ahead on grants. They do have a COPS grant, it's called, COPS. We've applied for it the last 2 years. I've been unsuccessful in getting it. So obviously that means we've been having this conversation with the police department for a few years about the need. And in working with Chief Learman and his staff and our staff and the experience here, have decided that this is something that we would like to bring forward to add on for the 25-26 school year and moving forward. So I did a little research also on what our area districts doing. And so it's average to have more than one SRO. Oak Creek has 3. Whitnall currently has 1 with about 2,400 students. South Milwaukee has 2 with about 2,800 students. Greendale has 2 with 2,700 students. Cudahy 2, 2,100 students. St. Francis 1 with 1,000 students. Oak Creek has about 6,500 students with 3, and Wauwatosa has 4. They have 3 right now because of staffing issues, but they have 4 approved on the books with about 6,800 students. So trying to look at where are we in that. I would say we're understaffed compared to other districts. Linda had also asked a question, I believe, about compensation and an MOU. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the city for the SRO position that's signed every year. And it's 70% of the officer that's in the role. So since the report has been done, I've talked to Chief Learman over time too about it being 70% of the officer we actually have. It was written in the MOU that that I inherited coming in as the top paid officer. So he has adjusted that in the MOU. That's also going to the city this week, I believe, is their meeting. So it'll be 70% of the officer that's actually in the role.
How much is it? How much are we paying?
Currently, this year, it's probably about 100,000 because it's that top paid, so obviously that will likely go down for that person, but then the other SRO, we won't know till this is approved and we know what officer it is.
Just 100,000 is the 70% share.
Of the top paid officer.
And do they have a vehicle that they have to we fund, or?
No, we just pay that part of their salary. They have their police vehicle that they drive that's on property, because if there's an emergency in the community, they might have to get called out, or they're moving between schools. So we've also worked with the prior chief on just how we allocate Officer Hempy's time. So currently she's at the high school Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the middle school Tuesday, Thursday. There's often times that we have to call other officers for support because she's stretched during that time. So, and I know that another question you had too, Linda, was about the DARE program. I tried to look back. It's been at least 10 years since the DARE program's been in the system. It's pretty antiquated and not really backed by research. But what we have been doing is Second Step is a program that's implemented in our elementary schools that has lessons that would be along those lines about safe, healthy choices, drugs, things along those lines. Our SEL lessons in elementary school and middle and high school also would incorporate some of those pieces. You heard from the Volition tonight. We partner with them on a number of different presentations and things
But
they
they're
do.
not a uniform officer is not presenting it. That was a key feature of the DARE program, was that an officer would be teaching that. So the other programs you mentioned, officers not doing.
Right, yeah. So the perk of having a second SRO is ultimately, in SROs I've worked with, they are in the classroom more regularly delivering lessons. And lessons that are either aligned to like our health curriculum and some of our other programming, but then also bringing in, and we try to do this now too, but there's just not enough time with one officer, of bringing in presentations on drugs, on vapes, on alcohol, on the repercussions of overusing or being addicted to those items. The other bonus perk, I guess we could call it, of having an SRO too, is that they know what's going on in the community and what the trends are, and we know what we're seeing in students in the school, so you can be very adaptive to getting the education in front of students that's timely about trends and things that are going on, right? Vaping's increasing in every community in the United States, and so having more opportunity to talk about the effects of vaping, we do some of that with Volition, but having our SRO to do that is beneficial.
Well, do we have any work activity on what the current SRO does? How many discipline or, what are they doing now? Do we have any work activity?
So they're involved in any heavier discipline that's going on. So if there's students that are dysregulated or things like that, that we have to call police in. In all of our schools, we have some students that we would call are a flight risk, so they may leave the school. It can become a safety issue, so calling an officer isn't our first go about at that, but that is something that sometimes has to happen. If there's comments made that could be perceived as a threat assessment is immediately put into place as part of our district practices, and the SRO is a part of that. And with that also comes a home visit, so the SRO is doing those home visits.
But do we have numbers on how many times that happens?
I don't have the hard numbers in front of me, no. They're also a part of attendance and truancy, so when parents or families are hitting that 10 mark and they're coming in for a meeting, our SRO is a part of that, and may also be doing home visits with that, or home visits to try to work with students that aren't getting into school to help get them into school.
The SRO does that?
Yeah, all of those things I mentioned, our current SRO is doing on a weekly basis. And other officers are maybe being called in at times to help support in areas when Officer Hempy is busy with things. And there's days too, like quarterly, she's out at least probably 4 days quarterly for just training that they have to do through the police department, negotiator training. She's done a drug-specific training. So it doesn't feel like a lot when it's 4 days quarterly, but it does make an impact on the availability to the buildings.
Well, we have a budget that's already short money, and now we're adding $100,000. And obviously, you've already said that they are going to come into the school and they need to come. So we're not losing that. We're still going to be having them available.
What you lose by not having the SRO that maybe I didn't hit on enough is that the goal is that you're not calling police in to be the hard hand when you need them because something's out of line, right? The goal that we really have with an SRO is that you're building rapport, and maybe with some of our students that have regular interaction, whether it's their choice or not with police, you're working to also build a rapport that police are not bad, that they're here to help our community, that they're here to help you build strategies to work through things. So yes, at times you can call patrol officers and you could go do a welfare visit at a school or work with a student, but it's not the same connection you're getting when you have a school resource officer. You're really working there to strengthen that community connection and that belief so that we're changing maybe patterns of behavior. We're helping support families that maybe need that. That's different when you're building a relationship versus when it's somebody else that's coming in that doesn't know you. And we've seen that. All of our officers that respond are very professional, but they will tell you too, and we've had them all in for coffee and to talk about this, is that they don't know they're trained in how to take on situations that are crisis, that are serious, and to go at it that way. They're not trained in how to work specifically with our younger adults or our elementary age students. So when they come in, they're often looking for what is the guidance you have, what do you want us to do or step in, because that's not necessarily their expertise. So having that SRO partner, even our adopted school partners, has made a difference in that, and they would tell you that because they're just getting in and seeing and being around kids more. That's not their day-to-day activity otherwise.
I strongly support this. Having an SRO at each school building, I think, is vital to safety. And I'm not quite sure how to capture just how quickly things can turn on a dime with some of these students who do have more challenging behaviors. And it's extraordinarily disruptive for the whole school environment when things get out of hand, and then especially if outside police have to be called in. And, you know, perhaps it's because I've had children in the middle school relatively recently. It happens more often than you'd think. And, you know, maybe if you hanging out on social media, you see people start, and I've had to take myself off because anytime something happens, the wheels start flying off the bus. So this is something that parents have actually said to me, we need an SRO at the middle school. Like, it's very rare that what a parent says we need actually then comes whole cloth in front of the board as something that we're considering, but this is one of them.
Well, it seems, our enrollment has gone up and up and up over the years. Our SRO number has stayed the same. Although I'm wondering what a normal tipping point is to a second SRO officer. I'm strongly in support of this as well.
Looking at the numbers that Annalee just told us, I mean, we're clearly understaffed.
50%.
Like,
I agree with
there
you.
I mean, there are districts that have half as many students as we do also, you know, already have 2 SROs. So I think it's a no-brainer. I think if we say that student safety is one of our top priorities, and I think that we can all agree that the safety of our students is one of our top priorities, there should be no question about having a second SRO in order to keep our
So
schools
a
safe.
uniform officer is key to safety?
No.
Having somebody in the building, just like Annalee just said, with the relationships, that's, you know, you knowing how the schools work. It's not the same as pulling somebody over for speeding on 76th Street to come into a situation where there is a student in crisis. And whether that's a mental health crisis for their own safety, or whether they are threatening somebody in the building, or whether there's an online threat overnight and you need to quickly establish, you know, who's safe or not, like what's really happening. And I mean, I'm pulling ideas here now from like TV shows and things like that, but you don't know what's going to happen, and all of these things do happen. And I think it would be important to have that baseline of involvement in our schools with an SRO, in addition to the great support that we have from the rest of the police department. I absolutely think it will help keep our schools safer. And I'd rather be safe than come back later and think, oh, well, would have been great if we had had that.
But it's not their, I mean, they're only one piece of the puzzle, and
But they're an edge piece.
there's so many other pieces that happen before
And,
that.
well, but we are, I mean, we can get into this and go round and round. We're doing all of these things. Student safety is important, right? I just said that's one of our main priorities. We are doing all the things. We have secured our buildings. We have plans in place. We are doing classroom lessons, and we are building community with our, student engagement, as we heard about from Ben Franklin today. We are doing all the pieces to create safe schools, adding an SRO or having an SRO, and in this case, adding another one, is just one more piece of a layer of keeping our students safe. And I'm sorry, you're looking at me like I'm speaking a different language, but I fully support anything that we can do to keep our students safe. We can't protect them from everything, and we know that as parents, right? You can't protect your kids from every single thing, but you're gonna do everything that you can. And in this case, I absolutely think this is
How do you know this
reasonable.
is the most effective use of our $100,000?
We don't.
And-
Mike Sue, where do you stand on?
So I think I like to get the information about the current buddy program which we have with the schools, the officers coming to each school. How is that become beneficial? Because we definitely student safety is our top priority, am I right? There is no, but at the same time, what is the right number of staff to do that? Do we need to have school resource officers for every building? Do we need to have only 2? Do we need to have 3? I think we need to kind of study a little bit this more about how the current, because as constituents are already paying the taxes and the city has the police department which is supposed to be providing the resources to the entire district, including the school district. At the same time, there is definitely a value of having someone who's known to the students as not as a police officer but as a school resource officer, where I think it's more of a different relationship with the SRO as compared to the regular police officer, because they are at the school so many times, they build up these relationships and all that stuff. So there's definitely value to that, but if at the same time, if you have this buddy program, will that help pitch in some of take the responsibility and kind of help Officer Amy shoulder some of the responsibility at the same time? I don't know the answers to that.
Well, I think
does
Chief
buddy
Lehrman
program
is
do?
right. I think the discussions with the chief and Anna Lee have answered that, right? I mean, that,
Well, and the
or at
buddy,
least that's what.
the adoptive school officers they're visiting the school maybe once a month. They're trying to maybe get in twice a month, but it's more to just be around the students, see kind of how the school works. Like maybe someone that principal could call if they happen to be on patrol, if
If
something
they happen
happened
to
at
be
the
working
school
that
and the
day.
SRO wasn't there, right, if they happen to be working. But they're not there all the time. Like they're running their regular patrol is their patrol, and they might be working on Tuesday and it's slower and they stop in and say hi to the principal and walk the halls for like an hour or half an hour. That's really what that is. Very different than an SRO, but just building connections. I think a plus of it is if this is something the board decides to support, we have many more officers that have been in schools now that know a little more about what it's like to be in a school, have an interest in working with students. I think we could have a really good pool of police officers that are interested in the role and want to work with students, because that's not everybody's role. Not everybody goes into police work to want to be an SRO, and so that's, I think, some of the perks that come with it. Andy, you were going to add something?
Yeah, the first thing I just wanted to mention, one, it's not like we're just taking over 70% of someone's salary that's on the police force. They'll hire a new officer. Whether that officer becomes the SRO or not is different, but they'll have another officer on hand. So it's important to know it's not just changing dollars with them to fund somebody that's already on staff. The second piece, relating it to our buildings that we're using, because we spent a lot of building theme today, you can think of an SRO as preventative maintenance versus the police officer as reactive triage to something that's actually happening, right? So as much preventative maintenance as Andy Daniels does on everything doesn't mean that sometimes the air handler is going down. Yep, sometimes it still goes down, even though we did the best we could to keep it running as long as we could. So SRO is very much that preventative piece. They're going to be part of the culture. They're going to try working problems before they actually become problems, versus the officer who stops in because an incident is called and the officer shows up at the front door. That's clearly a reactive, and they're going to handle it in a reactive manner, which is not what we want in school at all. So just kind of bringing a building analogy, since we spent a long time talking about buildings, to what the SRO might be.
Debbie, what are your?
And I really appreciate appreciated your explanation. I really liked that a lot, so I appreciate that. I think student safety is our number one goal here besides educating our students. But I think it would have been nice if you would have brought the hard numbers. And I know that there is a document that does exist like that, you know, how many times the police were called or how many times we've seen that in the past. And I think it would have been more palatable to just jump right in for board members if we do have hard numbers. So maybe before we do the final vote on this, maybe the hard numbers could be shared either in a KYI or at the board meeting.
Right, I mean, we should care about effectiveness. I mean, I mentioned the DARE program only because that was the program to prevent drugs and all that, and people just funded it because we're all about prevention, so they would just fund it. But then people start digging in and saying, is this really effective? Should we be asking those questions before we just add on?
Well, I think we can see that the SRO is effective in terms of the relationships that she has built and things like that. I mean,
and she's not going away. She's still going to be there.
Right, but she's one person trying to service over 4,000 students across 7 buildings.
She's supposed to touch
one person. That's
is that
like
is that the expectation? She's going to touch every student?
No, but
so anytime I was just gonna say, so anytime there's a threat assessment, it is mandatory. So she gets
How many
calls.
have we had? We don't know.
I would say I can think of 3 times this week where a school had to call Amy Hempy to do, and sometimes, right, threat assessment is tiered. Sometimes they go through the first set of questions, Linda, and they decide, okay, I think we got this under the control. But in nearly every case, she visits the home within 2 hours or a very short window of time. And that threat to determine whether there's a threat to self or others does not end until she's been made contact with the parents and made sure that we're doing everything. To me, as a parent, that gives you some peace of mind that you have a process for dealing with threats that involves school psych and social worker and all those other things you talked about, and teacher and principal. But it also involves the police because they can play a role. Officer Hempy plays a role with working with people at their homes as a police officer that we could not play. So when you're talking about numbers, to me, doing this gig, I'm old for a long time. I do not remember when in my younger years that was a big role of an SRO, doing these more mental health threat assessments, working with families. So I can get you the hard numbers on how many but I'm just doing anecdotally. I can think of 3 this week where she was called to conduct, and we're at Wednesday.
Well, and question for you guys who have worked with the SROs in an administrative way. Perhaps this threat assessment comes in, but Officer Hempy is in an active situation at some building with something else, and you have to call a different officer to do that threat assessment. Now that's a reactive officer who isn't as used to dealing with that particular social worker or principal or anything like that, and that's a different feel. Am I right? And that's what I've heard anecdotally. Is that
I'm not sure you would just pull anybody in.
Sometimes you have to. Normally we try to wait for her, but you can't if you're really worried about a threat, there's kind of a small window of time.
Or the opposite of that. If she's out doing a home visit for a threat assessment and something's happening at the middle school, for example, just because they're right there and I can point and it's there. If something's happening at the middle school, now you have a new officer coming in, a reactive officer versus a preventative maintenance officer who isn't, maybe has never even met the principal or the social worker or anything like that, and is coming into this charged situation as a new face that nobody, you don't have that comfort level. Whereas if you have an established SRO who comes into that situation, you kind of have those norms and those, you kind of know what the next step is. I think that preventative versus reactive example is good because that having people who are established are going to give you that consistency and be able to de-escalate much faster than some new officer who's never been in there. Not that they can't, they certainly can, but it's not their strong suit.
I'm not saying get rid of our SRO. I'm not saying that.
I know you're not, but I think I'm not sure that you seem to understand the inhuman numbers that we're trying to talk about. Like one person cannot necessarily.
Yeah, I think we'll get the numbers and
just give me the numbers. Yes. How do we know this is effective? This is $100,000 that we could get a teacher. We could get something else, and we have a police department we're already paying taxes to the police department. And we know that you were, good for you, able to establish these police officers in the school. It's not costing us anything. Or is it going to cost us something?
They're
I
not
don't
in the
know.
schools like an SRO,
They're
so I
not-
would definitely not want that to be viewed like an SRO. Very, very different.
There is a connection though, right?
They're
I
in
mean,
the
it's-
school like an hour a month, so it's not.
But you
They're
did it
not.
for a reason. You did it for a reason. It's a good program. I mean, it's not.
It's a great program, but it's not the same
It's
thing.
not a school
Linda.
safety
I'm
program.
not saying it replaces the SRO, but again, it's another layer that we're able to establish without adding cost. There is a cost to this stuff, and there's choices.
Yeah,
being
and there's a
made.
cost to the safety of our students as well.
We have an SRO. It's not
All right,
doing an
thank
SRO.
you. Thank you,
I just want to see some
everyone.
data.
Appreciate
And I
it.
appreciate the comparison with other districts. We didn't have that in the initial information either. So that was better than what we initially
Well,
provided.
we could have asked for that
All right, thank
before
you.
tonight.
I asked for many things before tonight.
Preliminary budget, please, Mr. Cromie.
Awesome. So this is the first iteration of the 25-26 budget. I will try to make it a little bigger, but trying to fit all of Fund 10 on there. I'm going to give you the highlights. So first of all, as Annalee mentioned, at this point, we're only adding in $325 to the revenue limit, which goes per resident student. So there's been talk of categorical aid, there's been talk of special education aid. At this point, we're adding none of that to the budget, as there is no consistency whatsoever to even what the ask is coming from numerous groups to the governor, ultimately to the legislator to make that decision. The second component is the governor hasn't put out his budget either. But given where we are with the legislature, typically when it's outweighing the governor, even as significantly as it still is, although it did shift a little bit more to balance, it still is enough to say we can do what we want. They typically start with the existing budget and work from there versus taking the governor's budget and working from that. So given that, we're taking the 325 because that's already in state statute, and we're saying we're gonna stop there. Resident population to remain relatively flat. I have our 10-year rolling average dropping about 10 students, but it's still relatively flat when you're talking 4,300 plus students. Open enrollment in relatively flat. So even though we approved seats today, not all of those grade levels are gonna see full seats. So last year, you know, we approved over 100 seats and we saw roughly 40 or 50 new students come in. We're anticipating that to be about the same. Interest earned, so that 280 under local revenues, a reduction there. So we've seen a few federal cuts. We have seen, I'll talk about CPI in total in a moment, but that has slowed. So we anticipate at some point that Federal Reserve will cut that again. That doesn't have necessarily direct correlation, but we know that interest earning is going down over time. So we just want to make sure that we're not over budgeting for that particular piece. Significantly more pieces on the expense side. So right now, we did receive the December CPI amount, so we have a final amount. It's 2.95%. So what we were estimating at the end of November is going to hold true through December. So that'll be the amount then that comes from the WRC, the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission, which is the statutory requirement for us to negotiate under. So I have 2.95% for every employee. I have 3.45% for our professional educators. So if you think about the model that we brought last year from Better Place to Work, we had to move some students to the, staff to the median. We had staff verifying years of service. We had staff now adding degrees that weren't recorded before because it wasn't a necessary component. So we know that we saw some wild jumps, and then that group fell under CPI for people that didn't hit any one of those three benchmarks. So we're trying to add a few more dollars in there to try to push at minimum a professional educator to get to CPI. I can't guarantee that that'll happen because I need the new numbers to do that, and we don't have that particular salary data yet, but we will. But in any case, I'm budgeting, again, 2.95 for everybody, 3.45 for professional educators specifically. Health insurance right now is being budgeted at a 10% increase. I will tell you, as of November, we're at 124%. So that 10% doesn't even make us whole on this year. Last year, we chewed through our entire health fund reserve. So all of that was gone. So the decision we made on health is gonna probably be coming back to us. We talked at, as Annalee mentioned, at Better Place to Work last night. Just in general, we provided some theoretical questions to staff to think about as well. So along with thinking about what is your 3 to 5 kind of things you'd like for health plan, what does it look like if you trade salary for a health insurance premium freeze? What does it look like if we said you have 4 dependents, so you're gonna pay more than somebody that has 3 dependents for your health insurance premium? So just some theoretical questions to start the conversation for them to wrap their head around. It's not working today as it is.
So can I
So
just
something
ask-
has to adjust in order to get it to be
Right.
working.
What is the dollar value of that 10% increase?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I'll shoot, but it's probably around $850,000.
$850,000.
And that's a ballpark, like
I appreciate
I haven't costed that in, but my salary spreadsheet, I plug 10% in and it kicks out, like it runs through the value. So that particular piece, open enrollment out, slight reduction. We've seen open enrollment really balloon it when COVID hit, and most of that was related to students venturing to a virtual school full-time, and then typically when students have a positive experience, they stay, right? So we're starting to see that trickle down. So a slight adjustment in open enrollment students going out. This doesn't necessarily affect us totally, but anticipating another 20% increase in voucher students, or in voucher costs. So that, again, is a straight revenue to expense, but it's important to note, like, it shows up on here as an expense. The revenue limit is affected by it, but it still shows as an expense. Common school funds, that's related to the amount of money we spend in libraries that comes specifically from the state. So something that we get a direct revenue for is increasing by $55,000, so we'll provide $55,000 more expense to libraries. We can't use it anywhere else. It's required to be spent in libraries, so it's a direct expense. So you'll see that common school funds, not necessarily a line item in here, but we'll go up about $55,000. I do have the SRO added in here that was just discussed, so we want to make sure we're planning from as much as we think might happen is important. Property and liability insurance going up 7%. Most of that is related to property, so the natural disasters that have been happening for the last 5 to 7 years are catching up, and property insurers are just charging more for property insurance to cover their losses, right? I mean, and that's every insurer. So it's that if we go to bid to another one, they're doing the same thing. So 3% for transportation, so that'll duck down to 2.95, but that's in our contract is to go with CPI. I have a 2% increase to our capital improvement budget. So if you think back to Franklin Forward, we talked about $96 million of capital improvement projects need to be done. We've been at somewhere around 1.2 million for a set period of time. That obviously will never catch up to $96 million, even though we're chopping some of that off in our referendum, but it's still, like, it's never playing catch up. So I just took CPI, that 2%, and said we're gonna increase our capital improvement budget by 2% every year, and kind of just use that to really take some small steps to increase what we're spending. Again, it's still not gonna catch up, but if we stay at 1.2, we're not even making any headway. So this just gives us a little bit of headway. I have some minor department adjustments. If you were to take a look at overall our department budgets compared from last year compared to this year, but we will still do the zero-based budgeting, $0 budgeting process. So all the departments will get that in February, and they're still gonna be asked to build from the bottom up. So I'm just anticipating there's some adjustments there for our January planning, but we'll again ask the department to do that same particular piece. There's still a whole bunch of unknowns. Like, I mean, we're in January, and we won't finalize this until October 15th when we get the state final revenue limit, or state aid as part of the final revenue limit, right? So we still have all of hiring season to go through. We still have actual enrollment to be taken, not third Friday this year or second Friday this year, which just happened, but like what's actually coming in for 25, 26. Tracking the biennium budget. Utility costs. So Andy Daniels works really incessantly, so I know his board liaisons have been privy to seeing some of that work on utilities, but like that's something that I know he's working at incessantly, we talked about it tonight, like, are there parts of the project that can be done from a utility saving standpoint, but still tracking that and making sure there's always avenues to adjust. So tracking that. Anything that comes from the Better Place to Work Committee, if there's any feedback that we can add into the budget. So all of those particular components are still there, but again, long runway, still many unknowns. At this point, we are looking at a deficit of $1.147 million. Just for comparison, last year at this point, when we brought this on the January budget, we were $1.2 million. So we're relatively in the same boat. And as you know, we managed to make it when we got to the fall. So I don't want to say I'm guaranteeing we're going to make it, but will there be changes to this? Yeah, 100%. Am I confident that something additional will come in the form of just straight dollars from the state and we don't have to do any adjustments? I wouldn't say that. Am I confident healthcare is going to dive down and 10% is too high? No, I'm telling you that's probably not happening either. In fact, I would push all of my chips to the table to say that that's not going to happen, that we're going to have to do something there if we want to balance out. And it's possible we say we don't want to and we're okay running in the red on it. Like, again, I'm just presenting it and you're helping guide me on that. So again, a lot of unknowns. This is just where we happen to be. We'll bring this back. I think it's in April when we bring it back. So we'll have more details at that particular time. We'll have maybe not more unknown or more of those unknowns become knowns, but we'll have a clearer path as to where some of them are going to be. Really specifically around health, as that changes July 1st. And in order to implement that, you typically need a minimum of 60 days, which pushes at May 1st. So obviously decisions have to be made before then. So we'll have some runway with that, with some real data leading up to that April piece.
So, that kind of made me think too long, but, so it is a 0% increase, so we're self-funded, right? So we're in control of our plans.
Mhm.
Is a 0% increase in health insurance a scenario, a possible scenario?
100%.
100% possible. We can do a 0% health insurance.
Yeah,
Plan.
I could tell you now how we're going to do it.
You can?
Sure.
I don't want to hear about how you're going to do it, but I just would say,
I'll
let's
flat
go.
out tell you how we could get to zero super easy. We reduce the district's contribution to health and put more on the employee. That's a strategy. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
the strategy,
Right.
but like we could do that because
Yeah.
you could just say we're only going to pay $5,000 for a family or a single plan and $10,000 for a family plan, and everything above that goes to the employee. Like you could do that.
Well, I guess I'm wondering where we're going on health insurance. What did we increase it last year? It wasn't 10%.
We didn't increase the district
We
contribution
didn't.
at all.
No, I'm talking about health insurance, our cost in this budget. What did the health?
We kept it flat from the
We
year
kept
before.
it flat, so we
Mhm.
were able to do that.
Yep,
Um,
but we see where that put us, right? At 124% of revenues
Well,
being brought in.
again, this is a point in time, it's a seasonal thing, that can change. As, you know, where you're at right now may not be how you end up, because it's seasonal, people do different things, so
Agreed.
saying that is, to me, is a little bit of a, it's a point in time. It may not end up that way. And this scenario you have presented right now, what is the levy increase?
I don't have a tax levy figured into this, but
Well, I did some figuring, because I know you wouldn't, because you got the levy number up there.
I only have the general fund levy. I do not have anything related to Fund 39 or Fund 81.
But I know what the fund, general fund levy was last year. You can find that easily.
Yeah,
So it
100%.
looks like it's like a 5.7% increase in levy. That's what it looks like, based on your 26 number and what I looked up online, 5.7%. That's where we're at right now. But I'm wondering, it looks like you don't have any increase in general aid though. Is that correct?
I have a small increase in general aid.
Because I saw the exact same number, so I,
Again, I'm trying to be as least predictive from the state as possible because I have no idea what they're going to do. So for instance, if they decouple, we're not getting any additional revenue from the state.
well, that's not going to happen. You just told us they're never going to do that.
I didn't say they're never going to do that. I said, I don't know where I stand on it, but I know it costs a lot of money. So in order to do that, they're going to have to funnel a lot of money in to do that, which means less is coming to everybody else.
But it is a one-time adjustment, and we won't have that 20% increase looking at us every single year, so.
Right, so
I
if
mean, take
decoupling comes
something-
in, take the voucher money out, because that, we won't need to levy for that. we won't need that expense, we won't need to add that to the levy.
Right. In fact, it'll come out, a savings, theoretically.
We're-
Possible.
We're net neutral. Voucher's net neutral to us. We have the same expenses we are allowed to increase the tax levy by.
Well, I'm not sure how it's net, someone's paying for that, and it's the taxpayers that are paying for it.
They are, but it's, from our budgeting standpoint, it's net neutral.
Okay, I get that.
It would reduce the tax levy by whatever is up there, the $1.5 million or.
Okay,
but
that's what I'm saying.
From a budgeting standpoint, it's net neutral revenues to expenses.
I'm not gonna argue with any further. There will be a reduction in tax levy if that happens. So, whether it's neutral or not. At this point then, you're just sharing this with us, or, I mean, I think we really gotta, obviously, health insurance is, where do you want that to go? Because you've been telling us that we're getting it under control, but every year.
I have
you
never
have
said we're
plans,
getting
you
it
have
under control.
ideas, but
Don't put those words in my mouth, because I've never said that.
I
Oh,
think,
that's-
I think one of the things is that the cost of health insurance is not state-wise, nationally. The cost of health maintenance and health cost itself is increasing and increasing and increasing. It's unfortunate, whether we talk about the hospitals which are charging premium amount, they are, the CMS is increasing their payments. My salary is not going up, FYI, but but there have been adjustments to a lot of hospital related payments as such. So unfortunately, healthcare cost is just going to.
This doesn't need to get into healthcare. This doesn't need to get into healthcare debate. I think, Linda, maybe your question, I think, is what do you want us to do with what do you want us to do with the budget?
right, this is our opportunity to give some direction, correct? I mean, you're looking for, and I think we have to, and I'm just saying, I think health insurance is gonna be the key again, just like it was last year. Although with your 0% increase in general aid, when there is $325, on the books, it's gonna fill that gap pretty easily also.
It won't apply to the 1.147 at all. An increase in general aid only offsets property tax. They're like a balance, they're like a seesaw. If general aid goes up, property taxes go down. It doesn't add more money to the pot.
Okay,
It just
well-
simply shifts the bucket.
Well, then we'll impact levy, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
In my book. So, and I would like to see, I don't think I wanna see 5.7% increase in tax levy this time around, so. There's some ways to see, there's some scenarios that could make that happen also. So, I appreciate the information, although it's difficult to kind of know, there's no context in your numbers here, it's just, there they are. And I think we could have better information in front of us if we had some context to those numbers.
I don't think we know any context, though.
We have a prior budget, we have prior year actuals, those would give context to those numbers.
But hopefully, since we have been self-insured, I think we can hope that the self-insurance approach will definitely help us balance that some of the increase in cost, because that was the whole essence which we went for self-insured, and I think that will help us in the long run. Even next year, this year it helped us, I think it will also help us next year too, because that's the whole essence of being self-insured, is that we're able to control some of the cost.
Well, I think we're working toward that. I also think that, our health insurance, I don't know if other people's that aren't self-funded, their health insurance costs are going up quite a bit as well, right? So yes, we have a far larger lever because we're self-funded.
Yeah, just a quick anecdote on health insurance. So I don't know if it was the end of November or December, but I was part of a group of probably 30 school districts that got together to talk about health insurance in general. We have broken off with 2 of those. and brought our consultants on. So we've asked 3 consultants to come into the room who all do the same thing, who all compete for the same business, to say, we want you to work together. So this would be, like, hard to say the equivalent, but it'd be like the GM of the Brewers and the GM of the Cubs getting together and sitting in the same room and figuring out how are we gonna split 50 players so each of us have a similar roster, right? Like a really hard task. So those consultants typically all look at us and think, we're their next piece of revenue, but we're gonna ask you to talk to them and work with them rather than try to poach us over to you. So we're starting this task with 2 other districts. I'd love to tell you that the arrows are pointing all in the same direction. We all know where it's gonna go. I have no idea where it's gonna go. But ideally, we're gonna find out really from data from those districts about what they're doing well and how do we take components of that. What are we doing really well and how do we help push components over to them? So ultimately, the 3 of us aren't joining health plans and saying we're all going under the same health plan, but how do we find out what things are going really well that we can implement? How can we share our information with you to provide some of those avenues that we're doing really well? Ultimately, how can we leverage approximately 10,000 bodies in a health plan? And is there potential to have some buying power, say with stop loss insurance, with 10,000 bodies versus our 1,000 or so? So we're looking at avenues. So we're not just looking at our plan in general and saying this is how we're going to affect our plan and it just works in this particular silo, but how do we gain a better understanding of what other people are doing much more deeply than just asking about their deductible and their premium share? But like, let's really get into it and take a look at it and get our hands dirty with it and figure out, is there something we can figure out for our plan to help? Like, there's no silver bullet. If there's a silver bullet, I'll write the book and then I never have to work again. So there isn't the silver bullet.
All right, anybody else? All right, school board liaison reports. Anybody have anything to mention?
So again, there was an SWSA call. I would have emailed you my slides, but I'm frozen out of my school board email, so working on that. But as Andy mentioned, everyone's sort of waiting on their asks until the governor presents his budget to sort of see where things are going. The legislature is now in session, a lot of reforming of committees, and the lobbyist for SWSA is sort of just circling, waiting to decide what they're going to have for their asks. But they have tightened up their talking points, their talk sheets, and again, encouraging us to look online and make sure we know who our representatives are and to reach out. They encouraged us to consider inviting our representatives and state senators if we have a large district event going on. I think that that's a clever thing because they like to get pictures and be seen in their districts. So keep in mind if we have anything big going on to consider extending an invitation to those. And then there was a big, long presentation on how state standards and state assessments are created. And it was a lot of information and a lot of talking. And basically, we have to just trust that they spend a lot of time doing it, and they will redo it every 8 years, apparently. So. And then I met with Matt, who is replacing Brad as the head of the community rec department. It was sort of a joint meeting with the 2 of them, reviewing. Matt's going to be presenting some changes to some structuring of how he's running his department. He's taken a lot of time working with Brad to really get things up and running, look at where improvements can be made, and he's going to be presenting numbers to us in a way that I think will be helpful for sort of a lot of questions that some of us have had about how does what the rec department makes inform how their budget works. So I'm really optimistic that what we're going to be seeing, I think is it a March presentation? I can't remember. Whenever it happens, that'll be Matt presenting to us, so I'm sure we'll look forward to that.
Thank you. Anyone else? School and community engagement reports, where we can talk about future agenda items. Southwood Glen School presentation, Friends of Franklin, athletics and activities report, new depository for referendum fund administration, proposal for additional SRO position action item, policies 5314, medication policy 5350, alcohol, tobacco, and drug use abuse prevention, intervention and treatment, Robin Wood School Presentation, Academic Excellence Scholarship Recipient Approvals, Technical Excellence Scholarship Recipient Approvals, State Convention Reports, and defeasance, the approval of the defeasance that.
We're going to defease?
So that's part of the strategy that's brought forth with the referendum and getting within the 82 cents. So it's all part of the levy that was brought forth in October.
It's approving what the budget, so it's money we've already spent.
It's money already earmarked, been tax levied for.
In this 24-25 budget?
Yes. It's all part of the referendum. It has nothing to do with levying additional dollars just to levy. It's all part of the referendum, 82 cents that we told taxpayers.
I don't understand. You have to show me the math on that if you don't mind.
I'll have Ellers do it.
So are we issuing bonds this year?
Yes. Yep, that'll come in April.
In April, and we're paying off?
Well, those will come in March because we'll be issuing in April.
This is not last year's defeasance, this is this year, or what?
Correct. Part of the strategy from the referendum.
This
Can I
is
ask
last year's budget, and we have to, yes, we vote,
What's
yes.
this- Right, the budget that, the
Budget that was passed in October.
Budget that was passed in October.
has a
We-
defeasance in it.
Has a defeasance in
As
it.
part of the referendum strategy. So the $8 million
I don't
that
know
was
what
added
as part
for
of the referendum strategy means, because I don't recall any defeasance identified in
part
the
of the
line
$8
item.
million that was added for Fund 39 has that defeasance in it. So there's an interest payment in October, there's a defeasance now, which gives us
But
that.
just show me the information, that's fine.
It'll come
Oh, I have one other item I want to bring up for future agenda items, because I did make a request for some information that I don't know where it's at. And apparently, the whole board has to act on it, or where are we at with that?
What is the request for information? What information?
I requested the cost of the referendum. All of the money that we spent on consultants, I want to know what that dollar value was.
And we talked about, we,
And Annalee was fully prepared to provide that, and then it got something went haywire, and here we are. So what do I need to do to get that?
to get that information
Yes.
about,
Right.
well, let's see, you asked for that information in an email, and we had talked, I don't know, several times over the last several years about asking for information as a one-off. And it has been one of the things that is.
Okay, so I know where you're going with this line of, so you're ultimately gonna say, the board's gotta vote if we want this information or not. That's what the end of this conversation is gonna be. Or are you gonna say, I'm the only one, so we don't have to answer your question? Or how does that play out?
Are you done? Yeah, okay. It's not a matter of this question. It is a matter of somebody, a board member, is going to ask for information that was not requested by the board and doesn't have anything to do with what the board acts on. Does the board want does the board want not your specific question, but generally as a process, what is going to happen with that? And we have talked about this as a board several times.
What's the end, what did we conclude? We're never gonna answer questions if one board member asks, and we don't want to answer her question, so you can pull that card? When you say that, where are we at with that? What is our board rules about a board member? I just asked a question. She was fully prepared to provide the answer, and then you pulled the card.
I don't know what you mean about fully prepared to answer the question.
Do you want me to pull up the email and read it to you? I can pull it up if that's what you want.
No, I don't.
Annalee's right here. Annalee, did you not send me an email? You're fully prepared to answer that question. You asked me, well, which consultants did you want? And so there was a back and forth.
I'd like to see the email, actually, yeah. I'd like to see it sometime. The one Annalise sent you saying that.
It
It's a
was part
separate,
of the
it's a
chain
separate
that you-
issue. It's a separate issue, Linda. Do we want a board member, any board member, to just be able to say, hey, stop what you're doing, pull out this information because I want it. It doesn't have anything to do with what we're voting on. It doesn't have it. How does it further the cause of board governance? And it's not this specific question. We've talked about this as a general statement.
It is this
several
specific
times.
question. It is the specific question. I want to know what it cost, what we spent to pass the referendum. I mean, we're oversight. Why can't we get that information? It's not a lot of work. Modern accounting systems you can pull that up right now. In the time it took us to talk about this, you could have provided that information. A citizen member can ask for that information. What would you say then?
This is clearly a question that the board would have to take up again. But we've talked about this several times. In the 6 years I've been on the board, we've talked about this at least 4 times.
This question is what I'm talking about. Don't talk about the theoretical questions that I could have asked or may have asked. This question. I want to know how much we spent on the referendum. You can get that information in a half an hour and we move on. But what is your point in making this something more?
That's what I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes. The point is, do we want the administration beholden to a board member that just asks question after question that doesn't have anything to do with what they're going to be voting on? Where does it stop and where does it not stop?
I think, we need to interject here, Kanath, So I think as elected officials, the board is for governance of the district. The board members, since they are representative of the community, have the right to ask questions which, whether it's spending, whether it is budget related, any dollar amount, any policies related, because that helps the board members make decisions. This has to be taken into consideration at the same time that the questions must be not in a continuous fashion where it is hindering the administrators to do their daily jobs. But there's a balance, Mike. There's a balance.
Yes.
What Linda is asking the question is, if she's asking a question about what was the cost of the referendum, it's a simple question to answer, and I think that she must be allowed to answer that question.
And I think I jumped in on that email because I saw the back and forth, and I just tried to clarify, saying nobody wants a report, a page after page report. It's just like, tell me it costs $10 to pass the referendum. I think that's all Mrs. Wachowski was asking for, is what was that dollar amount that it cost that we paid out to pass the referendum? And correct me if I'm wrong, is that not public money that we use to pass that referendum? If that's public money, then that should be public knowledge. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you did want a report, but I thought when I jumped into that email chain, just give us a dollar amount. That's all that was being asked for.
I have the email right here. Do you want me to read it? No. Because clearly I said, I was wondering what we paid each of our 3 consultants last fiscal year and year to date for this year. I was also wondering what the district may have paid for the ads during the final play of the football game Annalee answered about the ads. And she said, "Hi, Linda, please advise." Where did it go now? "Please advise what consultants you are referring to, and we will get back to you." She told me about the ads ran during the football game, $400. And talking about how the videos were created. And then I said, "Hi, Annalee. Consultants I know of would be Cadence Consultant, PRA, SD Smith, and School Perceptions. I suppose there may be more I am not aware of. So please include them. Thank you." And she said, "Hi, Linda. We will work on putting that together for you. The invoice for the information videos that ran for this," and she talked again about the invoice for the football game, was $450. Then the next response is Mike Sprague. "Hi, all. Is there some reason that we need those amounts? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something we'll be voting on?" And I responded, "I'm not sure if you're expecting an answer. It's a simple financial oversight of the board. How much was budgeted and how much do we spend? We don't vote on data from the coherence plan or the state report card, but we still review the information." And then Annalee comes in and refers to the time we spent with Joanne Stemke and Brian and your point about we can't have one person, whatever. And she's happy to work with my team to provide if it's requested by the board as a whole. And I did respond. I said, if I were a citizen or a news reporter making that request, what would your response be? And then Debbie responded. In my opinion, the question Mrs. Wachowski poses is simply for knowledge, no vote to be had. I believe that as public officials charged with being good stewards of our consultants' tax dollars, it is a reasonable question to ask and to be able to respond to should such a question arise from a community member. A simple total dollar amount is truly all that is needed, and it appears that the previous email from Mrs. Bennett was prepared to do so. Can I get that information?
So what does the board think?
As much fun as this walk down memory lane has been, I think that there's sort of two separate issues. I think that I am fine with, it doesn't sound like it needs to be a full report. I think we should answer this question now that it's become such a big deal. You ask a lot of questions in a very provocative manner, in a very constant manner. And so I think that in an attempt to set reasonable boundaries between your role as a governance official and a player in the administration, this became a test case. And perhaps test case is the wrong word, but an attempt to sort of clarify that role. And there have been attempts to have that conversation as a larger board, and they've gone better than others. So I would say, let's go ahead and answer this question. And in the future, just keep in mind that you aren't allowed, none of us are allowed as individual board members to act as an individual. I mean, we can ask individual questions in a respectful manner, and if they're too much work, then we might have to wait. But no one board member has any more authority than any other.
I would agree with that statement. I think our guiding principle, which we have talked about a number of times, and I'm not sure we've ever successfully managed to make it happen, is that idea that we are, while we are each individuals, we function as one board, and we aren't supposed to function individually. So I think that's where this is getting maybe a little bit stuck.
I
For
agree.
the sake of moving on, let's just answer the question, and I'll try and reflect on it and then just move on.
I think this is not an agenda item, and I think we do need to move on, and that if we want to talk about this, this probably would be a good subject for a board retreat.
Correct, I agree.
I would agree with that. I think we have talked about it at board retreat type activities, and the behaviors haven't changed. So if we're gonna talk about it, then we need to talk about it with the intent to actually establish a process that is then followed, not just, this is what we should do, but are we actually gonna do it? But I agree, it's not an agenda item tonight,
Yes.
and
I would say, yes, I agree with you.
We've talked about it far
I
more
think
than
we
we
should
should
move
have.
on, yes.
The question will be answered? And then, Mike, I want to hear you say that because you're the one that.
Or do you just want it to be on the agenda?
No, I want to know if I'm going to get the answer or not. Is Ann Lee going to provide the information on what we paid for that?
Does
I
the
think
board
that-
want,
that-
does the
that's
board?
fine.
I think that the
Thank
board
you.
has agreed that, the question which have answered.
Should be answered.
Can be answered.
Just a
yeah.
dollar
Yeah,
amount.
just a dollar amount, yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'm looking for a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statutes 19.851C, District Administrator Self-Evaluation of Goals Mid-Year. Action
moved.
item.
Oh, so moved. Second?
All right, motion's been made by Mrs. Larson, seconded by Mrs. Yank. We need to have a voice vote, please.
Mr. Sprague,
Aye.
Mrs. Witkowski,
Aye.
Mrs. Yank,
Aye.
Mrs. Sapersky,
aye.
Dr. Khan,
Aye.
Dr. Beer.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. We are in closed session at 9:10.
Can we have a 5-minute bathroom break?
Please. We're back in open session at 10:35.
I move that we approve the actions taken in closed session.
Second.
Our motion was made by Dr. Beer, seconded by Mrs. Sapersky. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to
So
adjourn.
moved. Second.
Linda, Angie, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 10:36.